hours or 8 hours taking the course in the RPA.
I did that. You did. We did.
And I'm just going to try to shrink you into 2 hours, okay? Because there's a lot happened. Feel free to ask questions. There's no dumb questions. I will say this is not an RPA training course as far as like training what to fill out. You can do that through coaching. This is more like what you need to fill out. What's the differences between the old and the new contract? Okay? We're there?
I don't know, you tell me.
You in there? Cool.
You need the guide or just the?
Can you make it bigger? Bigger.
Oh, yeah.
Less time. Alright. I need, you need, yep. Alright. Everyone online can see it? Can you see it and hear it?
Yes.
Thumbs up, so I'm hoping.
Okay. All right, everyone, thank you for coming. This is the new California Residential Purchase Agreement. It will drop on December 14th. The old RPA will go away. You won't even have access to it. The only way you'll have access to it if you have templates already set up. For example, within zip forms, the old RPA will stay. If you want the new RPA and the templates, you will have to go and change them out. Okay? Any questions on that? So, date prepared, offer is from, same thing, the property is situated. The only difference here on the parcel is assessor's parcel numbers. So before, if you had multiple parcel numbers in the same transaction, you had to kind of write it in the notes, right? Now you can put them directly into the system, and also gives a disclosure. Postal mailing may be different from a city's jurisdiction, buyer is advised. So this is not so much in Sacramento, but as you get rural, you'll have this issue. For example, we have a listing that's rural, as a Somerset address for postal, but it's located in the town of Mount Hawken, right? So you can have different things where the address is listed different from what actually the jurisdiction is. So make sure you know that.
And it'll just list them out, but if you have, like, that sheet,
You'll
where
just have
like
to- you'll just-
six, like, would like 6 fit, like, how many fit there?
I forget. I think it depends on the size, but
Okay.
you can literally just da-da-da-da-da, comma, da-da-da-da, comma, da-da-da-da, comma, right? So, any questions on that? Okay. This hasn't changed, this part where the confirmation, although I see a lot of you being lazy and we're asking for this, just so you guys know. If you do the cover sheet for your offer and you just run the offer, it doesn't check the confirmation of agencies. And I see probably 50% of your offers coming in without those checked, because I know you're being lazy and just using the cover sheet and not actually checking the contract. If you do that, then we're going to ask your TC and you to go get another document signed, a confirmation of agency agreement, which I don't know if you guys watching your files, we're having to send out a lot of those because you're not checking the box. So if you want to make your life easier for your client, have better customer service where they don't have to go back and sign another doc because you messed up on the contract, check the boxes. If you're an individual there, if you're in the same office, it's also dual agency.
Same office, not just KW.
Not just KW, yeah, not KW. So us and KW Roseville are different brokers, so that's okay. Each are different. But if Amethyst is doing something with Alicia, then we're together. Make sense? You're dual. Or DRE considers that dual. Any questions on that? So so one more thing they added They also moved up, this used to be on the bottom of the actual offer. It says if there's multiple brokers from different companies, representative buyers, then you would use an ABA. And you can check that case. Sorry. More than one brokerage. Now, we don't allow you to do offers with other brokerages except in rare occasions. Other brokerages would say you were partnering with someone at KW Roseville because we're another KW and we know them, we may allow it, right? But if you do, you would check that box. Before that was at the end of the offer, now it's at the front end of the offer. Any questions on that? All right. I'm going to spend a lot of time on the first 3 pages. Essentially what they did was they took everything that's negotiable in the contract, where you had to go through and check boxes and put dates in and numbers in, and they put it all in boxes in the first 3 pages of the contract. which is actually, I like it a lot, because it puts everything that your sellers or buyers need to know all right up front. And your lenders and all your other people know right up front, so which is nice. Now, you see they're just boxes. The paragraphs that used to be in there that describes what's happening are still in the contract, they're just later on there. And you can see here, like it says, A, it says, what's your purchase price? Is it an all cash offer? But it says 5 and 5B. So if you go later on in the contract, you'll see paragraph 5 and 5B, it will talk about the purchase price and the cash offer. Literally, if you're in zip forms, if you click that number, it will take you to the contract provision that governs that.
Does it auto-populate those things then later down in there? Like the purchase
No,
price or whatever?
no. So
Okay.
it only, later on, it only has the language, and I'll show you. It only has the language, it doesn't have the actual numbers. But the numbers slide here, the language that applies to those numbers is later in the contract. So this is a little different. Purchase price was still there, but the all cash offer was lower down in the contract. Now it's right next to it. So if you're doing cash offer, right there. This is different. Close of escrow was on this day or day. That was always up front. This is different. This should be at the end of the offer. Now it's at the beginning, the expiration of the offer. As you know, the offer is good for 3 calendar days. You could change it, and now it's up front and not at the end of the offer. All right. Initial deposit. Initial deposit is here. Now, they clarified something. You can put in a number, but you can actually put in a percentage if you want to. So if I want it to be 1% of the purchase price, you can put in 1% and it'll automatically put the number in for you. Okay? Now, and note something here, percent number above is for calculated purchase and is not a contractual term. What does that mean? That means you say 1% of the purchase price and it's a $500,000 offer, it puts in $5,000, right? And say you get a counter to $550. You accept that counter to $550. This says, just because it says $5,000, because you put 1% there, that does not matter. It's the $5,000 that matters. That means the deposit is still $5,000, even though they counter the price to $550. The percentage is only for calculation purposes, the actual number. So if you're on the list side and you want to increase the deposit to the purchase price, you will need to also counter the EMD, otherwise the EMD will not automatically adjust based off percentage. Clear as mud? One thing that they did change fundamentally from the old RPA to now is this: within 3 business days after acceptance or by wire transfer. The buyers in the contract now, they have removed the ability for brokers to accept checks. So because that is not a practice that we do, we don't recommend that. So no longer is there a provision in the contract where you are going to be taking a commission check and giving it to escrow.
Deposit check, right?
A deposit check, a buyer's deposit, EMD. So now, and they also made it only wire transfer. So if you want something else, you have to write it in. Either cashier check or check if you want something else. Now, if we go to 5A1, they also changed the provision. It says escrow is default is always a wire transfer. If you put something else in there, if escrow says no, escrow has a choice. If escrow says no, only wire transfer, then only wire transfer works. So in the contract, it gives power to the escrow company to determine how they get the deposit. But one, it doesn't go through you anymore. It's only wire transfer unless you put something in there. But if you put something they're not willing to agree to, it must be wire transfer. Yes.
Can you put buyer's choice or something generic like that?
No, escrow could say no.
Okay.
So if you're going to put check or something like that, then I would put check. Right?
Okay.
So, yeah. Okay. Same thing with the increased deposit. Most of you don't use increased deposits, but if you increase deposit, same thing with the number. The number is not a calculation, but this. Upon removal, they put the dates here. So typically when you do an increased deposit, it's based on removing contingency. So I'll go from 10,000 to 20,000 on the deposit once I remove all my contingencies, or once I remove the inspection contingency or something like that, right? So you can see that as well. Okay, let's talk about loan amounts. Everyone clear so far? Any questions online? Everyone good?
As far as like the increased deposit, is that just what's more like on the table and what the buyer can lose? Is that what that's for?
Yes, to make your offer more sexy. So you tend to find this happening in expensive listings, you tend to see this in very tight areas. So like Barry, you see a lot of increased deposits. So I'm doing $1 million purchase price, right? I'm gonna put 50,000 deposit up front. I'll do a 7-day inspection period. Once the inspection period, I'll put another 50,000 in. And that's just saying to the seller, look, I'm putting 100,000 money. If I don't close, I could lose this, right? So it's putting more emphasis on it, right? So increased deposits often happen on those kind of situations. You know, I've seen them in Davis. Seen them
Isn't there
in
like a cap amount that they can lose, the buyers? Isn't it like 3%?
3%.
Yeah.
So you may do 1% up front and 2% on the back, an increase, right? And get it to full 3. And that would make it, you know, if you had a similar offer to someone else, that'd be more sexy to a buyer, or more attractive to a seller, because please turn off your cell phones. Do that. So loan amounts. Any other questions on that? Oh, they did change the form, sorry. If you do an increased deposit, it used to be an RID. Now they changed the form and call it a DID. What's that mean? If you do an increased deposit later, it's not automatically put into the liquidated damages clause. So if you're on the list side and they did 1% up and then increased deposit 2%, but they don't provide a DID, that extra 2% won't be negotiable as far as liquidated damages. You'd only be able to go after the 1%. So if you're going to do an increased deposit, saying you're going to provide a DID, which says, and if you look at that form, it'll say, this increased deposit is going to be part of the liquidated damages clause, and the buyer has to sign off on that. And so I have to sign off. That way it tells them it's going to be put in there even because it's later. Okay?
Do you have to include that? The DID?
Well, it does say so. But if I guess if the listing agent is lazy or doesn't know what they're doing, and you don't include it, then legally it wouldn't be included in the liquidated damages clause. Well, they're but I'm just saying, if you're on the list side, you need to, if they're doing increased deposit, you better ask for the DID along with the increased deposit. Right? So, and this happens at the time of the increased deposit, not at front, but when they actually deposit. Loan amounts, first rate, percent of purchase price. So they added this in because a lot of you were getting this wrong. I don't know why. Like, how much is the loan amount? Why do you know? Sorry. What'd you do? Carnegie.
I take screenshots real quick. Continue.
A lot of you, what's the loan amount for an FHA loan? No, what's the loan amount for an FHA loan? No, what's the loan amount for an FHA loan? Loan amount, what's the percent loan amount of an FHA loan? 96.5. Thank you. 3.5 down, 96.5% loan amount. Are we all on the same page? Same page. So you can put 96.5% here, and it will auto-populate your loan amount for you. Because a lot of agents get this wrong, because I don't know what they're doing on their cell phone calculators, but they just don't know what they're doing. So if it's a 10% down, 5% down, 20% down, you just say 5% on a 95% loan amount, put 95% and put the rate in, put the loan amount. All right? Like I said, it's like real estate for dummies, right? Fixed rate, initial rate not to exceed this, buyer to pay 0 points or up to. So this changed as well. So you know in the old offer you could put not to exceed this rate. And you could put buyers to pay blank points, right? I don't know if you remember that. Now it says you can put initial rate not to exceed X, but it changes, says you're automatically to default to 0 points, and then, or you can do up to a loan amount. Does anyone actually use this?
Yeah, we leave it blank.
You can leave it blank, but what does it do? Does it help you or hurt you if you don't fill it out? Does anyone know? Depends on what? Stop doing that.
You're good. All done.
If you put a rate in there, now the rate is tied to the loan contingency. That means say rates spike during escrow, even though the buyer's approved for the loan, but the rate went up 0.5 point, and they don't want to make that payment anymore, they can cancel a loan contingency. So they don't have to actually be denied the loan, they just can't get the rate. And the point is 0 points. That means it's whatever the lender is quoting them a rate, and they don't have to put money in to buy down the rate, right? But if you put like 1%, that means they got to be able to put 1% of the loan amount into the rate and see if they can buy down the rate to that rate. But if you put the rate in, it gives you an additional security with the loan contingency itself. So if you have a buyer that's really sensitive to the payment, maybe they're maxing everything out, you might want to put the rates in, or as a general habit, put the rates in on the buy side. Make sense? Okay. And then notice over here it says FHA, VA, car farms, HVAC, HID attached, seller financing, other. Click those boxes, it's all automatically going to attach those docs, the HVAC form. Now I will tell you there's a reason why, and we'll get down to that later. But it's going to ask you to fill out the FVAC with the contract. I see a lot of you ignore it. Now, if you click it, it's automatically going to put it in the contract, but I see a lot of you guys ignore filling it out and don't send it. I would recommend sending it if you're on the buy side. And we'll talk about this later, but it gives you an unwaivable right to cancel the deal if the appraisal is short. Even if you waive all contingencies, including appraisal, if it's an FHA or VA loan and the appraisal comes in low, federal law says they can cancel and get the deposit back, period. You can't waive it, you can't get rid of it, it's there. So if you're on the list side and it's FHA VA loan and this, just know, low appraisal doesn't matter, they can still cancel. Now, if it's conventional or other, they don't have that right. If it's FHA VA, it's a government insured loan, they do.
What about those like appraisal gap scenarios? Doesn't matter.
What's that?
If, I learned this one the hard way, where if it was.
Appraisal gap? Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter at all.
So they can say that all they want.
They can say, we waive our appraisal contingency,
And this
we
overrides.
will do a $20,000 appraisal gap coverage, and it comes in 5,000 low.
I literally have.
They
that
can say,
happen.
no, I have an FHA loan, I want to cancel, they have the right to cancel, get the
And
deposit back,
cancel.
Okay, so I
period.
definitely did not know that. Nor did I.
That was the case before, and it's always been the case, they are just highlighting it now, because it's been an issue, because we've had so many appraisal waivers, and now people are backing out later, and they can't. If it's an FHA VA loan, if you read the amendatory clause, it actually says in there, they have a universal right to cancel, rescind the contract, and give their deposit back if it
How do
doesn't.
you know if they're legit or not about wanting to cover it?
You don't,
Yeah.
yes. So-
You don't.
You don't, yes.
John, so far, based on everything you've said,
Yes,
this form is more buyers friendly than sellers friendly. So if I was the listing agent, you're checking all these boxes, I would be countering it.
you can't
That's
counter
what
this
it's
part, though. You can't counter that right to cancel for FHA VA loans, the right to cancel based on low appraisal is not waivable. The buyer cannot waive it. The seller can't force them to waive it. It is considered a federal right.
Wow.
So there's no protection for the seller then?
No protection.
Zero.
Zero.
When it comes to that.
There already wasn't, but there
No, how
already
this-
wasn't, I guess.
How's this? It was always the case.
Yeah.
That is current law. It is in the past current law. People just don't know it, but more people are knowing it, so CAR wants people to know it more, so they're putting it in there, making it more clear for people. But it's always been the case. And I've advised people who wanted to back out on a contract, no place away, if something happened, and they got a low appraisal, I said, you can use the mandatory clause. You can cancel. And I've got deposits back, appraisal, full all contingencies waived, low appraisal, and got the deposit back because of this clause.
So it can't help you.
Depends on
So
what's
that's
going on.
about, FHA. or-
So, if you get a full thing, if you know the agent is savvy, you're probably going to just know, you have to go to your seller, says the appraisal is low. I don't care if they gapped it or anything, they can still
This
cancel.
is the risk that you take by accepting that offer.
On the buy side, the more this is knowledgeable, the more likely your FHA VA offers are going to be disadvantaged against conventional offers, because conventional offers don't have those protections. All right, clear as mud? They did second loan amount additionally financed. You notice the FHA VA go away because you can't do FHA VA second loan. They do have the rates and the 0 points as well. I just want to note some things. A lot of you are doing down payment assistance through the state, which is actually a second silent loan. You didn't know that. Sometimes a third. So if you do the full amount, sometimes you can just do the deposit, a lot of times you can do down payment, sometimes you can pay closing costs as well. So if you do the full, they're actually getting 2 silent loans. If they're just paying the down payment, they're getting 1 silent loan. But the state puts 2 silent loans. What does silent mean? They don't make payments on it, but it sits there and grows interest, but they don't make payments. I get a lot of questions. Do I put that in there? Some of you are putting in the additional financing saying, oh, DPA assist, DPA loan, CalFHA loan. If you don't put it in, it's fine. You're not required to put silent seconds down payment assistance loans in. But if you do, now it becomes part of the loan contingency. So if they're approved for the loan, but the state runs out of money and they don't approve the down payment assistance, you can still cancel on loan contingency. But if you don't put it in, they're approved for the loan, but they get denied from the state, can't cancel a loan contingency because you didn't disclose it. Clear? Clear as mud? Anyone confused?
Like, what's the best thing to do there? Sounds
I would
like
put it in. If I was writing a buyer contract right now, I would put rates in and I would put down payment assistance loans. Because it gives you more protections from your buyer side. Let the John Lantings of the world counter it out, right? So,
That video is good.
What terminology would you put there for that, under conditional financing?
yeah, I would just put other, and I put down payment assistance or California State Down Payment Assistance, DPA, right, something like that. You don't have to be super, but you gotta put, the amount of it, right, that sort of thing.
So, John, quick question. That was for box 5C1, correct?
5C, no, we're in 5C2.
5C2.
Sorry, I'll do that for the. So 5C2, if you're doing a down payment assistance second loan, even if it's silent, you need to put it in if you want it part of the loan contingency. Good. E3, 7A, right here. They moved occupancy type up to the front. So now they have your automatically default to primary like it was before, but now your secondary is also there and investment. The reason they did this was at a lender's request. Lenders up front wanted to know what type of loan it is. The secondary house is what?
They live in 2 different places.
Yeah, 2 locations, a vacation home, something like a secondary location. And the reason they did this is because lenders distinguish between primary, secondary, and investment homes for down payment and other requirements. So just be careful, because I know some of you will have investors because they want the lower down payment rate on the check it over here instead of over there. So just be careful. That's called mortgage fraud. Okay. So it will automatically calculate your down payment and purchase costs and purchase price. Any questions on page 1? Moving to page 2, and we got a whole lot. All right. Page 2, 5E seller credit. Now you don't have to write in a seller credit. Remember, you have to write in seller will credit the buyer 3% toward the buyer's closing, recurring and non-recurring closing costs. Now it is written in. So you can, on the first line there, 5E or G1 5E, you can put in a percent or an amount. Once again, the percent is only for calculation purposes. So you put 1%, the credit will not go up if the purchase price goes up. So if you went for 500, you're doing a 5,000 credit. Now I'm going to 550. You're not going to get a 5,500 credit unless you counter it in, because it's only there for purchase purposes. And seller to be applied to closing costs. If your lender, some lenders want to say, they want their lender credit to say toward the buyer's recurring and non-recurring closing costs. If your lender wants that, then you need to check the box and put recurring and non-recurring. Got it? Clear as mud? And then we still have additional finance terms, although now that we have all this other stuff, I'm not sure what you'd put in there, but verification all cash offer, attachment offer. This is the same as before. If you made an all cash offer, the cash verification should be with the offer, the proof of funds. But this says you can check 3 days. That's the same as before. Now they have verification down payment assistance. This changed before. It defaults to say, I will provide verification of down payment and closing costs within 3 days. That's what the current contract says. Now it is saying that verification, and then I'm in H26A, that they are, now it's saying I'm providing proof of closing costs with the time of the offer. So if you submit an offer, yes.
You have a question? Where's that box, the recurring and non-recurring box that needs to be checked?
It's in G1 5E and it's under additional terms. Up there, see other, or other, you click other and say recurring, non-recurring, CC, just so like that. Okay? Cool? Okay. But now, just so you know, the contract has changed. It is now in the contract to require you to disclose proof of funds for your down payment and closing costs upfront with the offer. So if they're asking for proof of funds, some of you want to point to the lender's letter, some of you go like, well, my lender letter said they verified all funds necessary to close the loan, so I want to use that. Some agents will be okay with that. Some may say, no, I want proof of funds for down payment and closing costs. They have the right to ask for that now. A verification of loan application attached with the offer, 3 days, and this is different now. They're putting this here, which is really good. Listing agents requested this, and I think it's actually a good thing on here. And if you leave it blank, I would actually probably not like your offer as a listing agent. So I'd recommend you check it. But it's going to ask you pre-qualification, pre-approval, full underwritten approval. Could someone explain to me what the difference is?
Well, the full is that it already been through underwriters.
So fully underwritten means, so your buyer, not all lenders, but some lenders will take your buyer, they'll pull the credit, they'll get all the docs, and they'll run it through the underwriter. We call that TBD, to be determined on the property. They'll run it all the way through, and they'll come out through the underwriting process and have full approval, just missing the appraisal, which is obviously the best way, because you're telling your seller, I'm already approved, all we got to do is appraise the property. As long as the appraisal works, we're good to go, right? In fact, I've seen offers with full underwritten, so release the loan contingency, because you're already a loan approved. You don't need the loan contingency to get approved. You're already approved, so you can waive loan contingency. All you need is appraisal, right? So not all lenders do that, but you need to talk. So if we have clients that are like iffy on the loan or tight, we usually recommend full underwritten approval. Especially if they're at a price point where I know I'm going to struggle getting offers accepted, then we're running them through full underwritten approval, because now I can go in with no loan contingency, right? I can shorten the time. All I have to do is worry about the appraisal, right? So, what's pre-approval and what's the difference between pre-qualification and pre-approval? Furman, you're a lender. Furman.
For the pre-qualification,
What's the difference?
for pre-qualification, I believe it's ran through DU.
Yeah, so pre-qualification is, they call me on the phone. They told me they make this much.
No, the documents are correct, pre-qualification, but pre-approval is that it's processed little bit, so it's ready to go to.
Correct. Pre-approval is, I saw their docs, I pulled their credit, I ran it through DU, it says it's okay, kind of thing. Pre-qualification is, I talked to them, they told me they make this much, they told me they have this much in the bank, they told me they employed this long, they told me their credit's here. And I wrote a letter to approve them. Because based on and so pre-qualification is a letter that says, if the buyer what the buyer told me is true, yeah, they'll qualify. That's a pre-qualification letter. So just so you know, I think agents will play with this, or I don't think agents will know what it's about. So make sure you're looking at the letter. I know a lot of you just gloss over the pre-approval letter and just make sure the amount is there, but I would actually start looking at your pre-approval letters to see what they actually are. And lenders will be coy on that, because they'll actually they can't play with this. They have to say what they actually have to say, otherwise they're violating law, right? So look at the letters, and sometimes agents win. So that's different.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So on a lender, when you ask them to run into the underwriting department, and they say, no, we can't, we only do it until we have a copy.
Yeah.
What is that about?
Certain lenders.
Certain lenders will not do TBD. Because think about it. They're going to say, I'm going to waste my loan officer's time, and I'm going to incur resources on the underwriter's time, and we may never get a contract. This may go away. This may disappear. The buyer may change their mind. So not all lenders, and now if lenders are impacted because they're super busy, a lot of times they'll say, yeah, we'll do it, but we're super busy, so it's going to take 3 weeks to get done, because because they're gonna put it on the back burner, right? So if your lender doesn't do it, then you need to
Get a new lender.
get a new lender, basically.
John?
And I have one that only.
Yeah.
For clarification on the underwriting part, it's actually a desktop underwriter. You're
Yeah.
not speaking to a physical underwriter or anything. You're just running it through a system.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're verifying docs and things.
Yeah, well,
like
of
that.
course.
Yeah.
You're doing that extra step.
Every step, yeah. What?
John,
Yes.
on the 3 weeks part, so if the lender says, they're gonna get it done in 3 weeks, that's long for this. What would be more realistic, assuming they don't put it back on the back burner?
Oh, lender can move pretty
The
quick.
day you're asking. I'm ready to write this offer, run this
I mean,
for
they can
me.
produce all the documents up
Within an
front
hour,
and pull
you're giving
credit.
me
Yeah,
the
they can give them-
go-ahead.
They can do it pretty quick.
Same day.
What lenders
If
are you
the
working with?
buyers are cooperative and they send it out to.
Yeah, it really depends on the cooperation of the buyers, like how often do they send them the docs? If they come back and says, we need these additional docs, how quickly they get it back to them, right?
But also the employer, because they have to do the verification.
Yeah, they do
of
big
employment,
review,
so it
yeah.
depends how cooperative those people are.
Okay. They put this up front, and this was still the same, but you have 5 days for verification of property condition. I highly recommend, okay, one, this is always the same, this was the same as before, but now it's up front. You cannot do the verification, you cannot do the final walkthrough for the clients. We've had that. Where agents wrote checks, they did the final walkthrough, everything's fine, buyers move in later. What's this? Guess who paid for it? Agent did, because they said it was fine, right?
FaceTime. What about FaceTime?
No, the FaceTime doesn't matter, they must be present.
So they
If you
just
go
have
and
to
say
waive
it's
it?
fine, they must sign a VP that says, I waive my inspection. If you want get out of jail free, you gotta say, I gotta waive my inspection. So, you're gonna sign that, yes.
Someone asked, will it be the responsibility of the lender to provide the proof of application?
Yes, actually, and you'll see a change, we'll get to this later, but there is a new clause in the contract that specifically states the listing agent will have permission to talk to the loan officer for status updates. So literally you will give, and although that's kind of been implied already, now it's explicitly stated that the listing agent has a right to call the loan officer, and the loan officer has to answer their questions about the loan. So if you wanted to say, is this a real qualification letter or is this a pre-approval letter? You can call in and say, what did you actually do, right? And put them on the fire. And trust me, you put their feet to the fire, they're gonna tell you exactly what they did, right? So, this is a different assignment request. So what's an assignment? Does anyone know what assignment is?
Is that where they're assigning like a different buyer?
Yeah. Sometimes you see this wholesale, but I also see you guys adding in new buyers into the contract midstream. Or some of you are doing meeting with wholesale. Ever got an offer and it's a fixer home and they're like, it's John Bardano or assignee? And that means they're a wholesaler. That means they're putting the property in contract and they're trying to sell it to another investor. They get the deal. They don't have enough money to do it, but they're trying to get an investor to do it because it's a deal and they'll make money in the process. So trying to do assignment. The problem is a lot of listing agents were getting these requests right at close.
Yeah.
And it's delaying close. So listing is like, this is done. And it's not even just wholesalers, but it's people like, oh yeah, we want to put the wife on the, even though she's not on the thing, we want to put her on title. Now we have an AOA coming at the last minute. Now everything, the lender's like, whoa, 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 and now we're backing up everything, right? So now, this is a change. Assignments must be done within the first 17 days after acceptance. And this is passive. There's not a required contingency release on this. That means on day 18, if you do an AOAA to the other side, they can say no.
Can they say no anyway? It's a request, not a command.
Correct. Assignments must be approved by the seller. So.
Please ask your buyers early on if they're adding a spouse or need a co-signer.
Yeah, this is the point of why you want your loan up front. You need to help your buyers get the loan up front because oftentimes we get out underwriting and there's not enough money and now we need to add someone in to make the loan work. And if they waited and we're at day 17 and now you need more delay, you're screwed. You can't add them in later. They don't have to do it, right?
Even if the seller's okay with it?
The seller can agree past that. But the seller can say, I don't even want to entertain the request. So after 17, kind of like the request for repair, they don't even have to respond. They don't even have to respond. You could say, hey, we want to add this person in. He says, so no, we're not even considering.
No, it'll be like, deal with it on the back end.
All right. Any questions on that? Okay, loans. Let's talk about loans. These are fun. Loan contingency, 17 days. All the contingencies are now moved to 17 days. They removed the 21 days. All contingencies are now 17 days, whether your lender likes it or not. It is what it is. So now they wanted to uniform the timeline, so there's all in one contingency timeline, all 17 days, unless you obviously change that. And if there's no loan contingency, you check there. Appraisal contingency. Contingency shall be based on the appraised value at the minimum purchase price, or X. You can pay more. Yeah, you can pay more out of pocket. So a lot of people put in appraisal gaps in here. You can put appraisal gaps in here now, written in.
So how would you write it?
Yeah.
Whatever you want.
So you're putting in the max of what you would pay,
Yeah,
up to,
up
not
to.
to exceed.
Yeah,
blah,
not to
blah, blah.
exceed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
It takes away the legal.
the legal part of it, right?
responsibility
So.
of each writer, correct?
Now, I just want to note on appraisal gaps. If you put an appraisal gap that says, I'm going to go 10,000 more than the appraised value, right? If it's still short of the purchase price, the seller can still cancel. They don't have to bring down the price. I just want to note that. I get that questions a lot. If the appraisal gap is still short of what the purchase price you originally wrote on the offer is, then the seller can still cancel because they don't have to go down.
Unless specified.
Unless specified in the clause, which if you are a listing agent, I would not accept that clause. So, there's what? Okay. No appraisal contingency. And this says, removal of appraisal contingency does not eliminate appraisal cancellation rights in the HVAC.
There it is.
Right there.
Written out for you now.
So, now everyone's gonna know. So.
That should be in capital letters and bold.
Well, as an agent, you should point that out to your sellers or buyers, right? So. All right. Investigation of property, if you see 17. So, if you want to remove or waive any of these contingencies, you check this box. It will pull a CR into your contract, and you will need to fill it out. Now, I want you to know I see this a lot, and this is dumb. I'll see zeros in the dates for like investing. I'm going to waive my inspection contingency. I put 0 in the investigation date. That does not waive inspection contingency. It doesn't waive any contingency. It only means when you're in escrow, now you're late. That's all it means. They still have an inspection contingency, so they still have appraisal. If they write zeros in the dates, they still have contingencies, because remember, contingencies are an active release. You have to actually put in writing that I release that contingency. If they don't provide a CR with those, it is not valid, unless they check the no appraisal, no loan. But
So then-
investigation, they gotta actually provide a CR to do that.
So if you are waiving it, you just don't fill that out, and then you just check the CR attached?
You
Correct.
provide a contingency removal.
Yeah, you provide.
And that gives you the specifics?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, I like this because I put in, if you notice L3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, put in, there's actually several different inspection contingencies you have in the contract. And this lines them out. So you don't just, everyone's like, I have inspection contingency. It's not one contingency, it's actually a group of contingencies together that we call the inspection contingency. So a lot of you are getting smart about that. I see your CRs in this check. I'm doing property investigation, and a lot of you are not checking the other ones, which is smart. So there's investigation of property, 17 days, informational access. This has always been the case, but they're putting it up front because us brokers complain because we're getting a lot of disputes on this. Buyer's right to access property for information purposes is not a conceit, does not create a cancellation rights, and applies even if the conceits are removed. So, in the old contract, which is the same, we're just putting it up front now, but most agents don't know, the buyer has the right to access the property for 17 days from the start of escrow, and then from 5 days prior to close of escrow for the final walkthrough. Other times the seller can deny access. But this doesn't apply, it's not a contingency. This is just they have 17 days. So maybe they have a 5-7 day contingency, they release the inspection contingency, but they can still come for 17 days to look at the property. But here's the thing, it's for informational purposes only. So if they want to measure to make sure the refrigerator fits or their TV is going to fit, they can do that. But they can't say, oh, I saw something, now I want to cancel. They don't get a new, or I just saw that, that's new information, now I have a right to cancel. That is not the case. They cannot do that. Are we clear?
Maybe.
So I get this dispute a lot, I don't know why, where listing agents and sellers don't want to give buyers access to the property after the inspection contingency is done, and the fact is you have to. We clear? Review of seller documents. This is the TDS, SPT, all those sorts of things. The preliminary title report is common interest disclosures, which is your HOA docs, and review of lease or lien items. It also refers to PACE or hero lien items. If your listing has a PACE or hero lien, they're very nasty. They're actually tied to the property tax bill, and they're very hard to delineate. You will have to pay these off at close, and there's prepayment penalties with these loans. And they were done, and they're scammed anyways. They're stupid stuff. If you come across this, you can talk to me, but they're stupid loans. That's why they put it. Just so you know, all this and review lease and lien items. So if there's an alarm that has a lease on it, yeah, the predatory one. So if you have a leased item, which is often solar, things like that. Now think about this. All these are in inspection contingency, right? So say the HOA, say they waive inspection contingency up front. And then the HOA docs get there 10 days later. What happens? 5 business days now to cancel. What if you don't get them the solar lien information till 5 days into the contract? They waived inspection. Guess what? They got 5 days now. What if you get your listing agent, AVID, agent visual inspection closer, and then you give them late? 5 days. So literally, for those of you who are lazy with your AVIDs, and say you're going to close, and you give it on day 25 because you finally got out there to do it. Literally, all contingency away, we're about to close, you gave the buyer a right to cancel right there and get the deposit back, period. You. And if it goes south, who do you think they're going to blame?
Well, it would be your fault.
And that's especially for Andre over there.
Andre.
I have beat his butt numerous times on this issue. So.
Maybe people really cancel over.
He knows it. He knows it. Just so you know, those are all that encompass the investigation contingencies. Questions? Yes.
What were the timelines for things like reviewing seller documents, title report, HOA docs? Like, what were the timelines in the old RPA? Because I know there was, timelines for inspections.
It's 17 days.
Was it always 17 days?
It was always 17 days.
So if on the old RPA you marked 10 days for buyer inspections, that you're saying 10 days for all those things? Okay.
Correct. So in the old one, you put 10 days, and it would encompass all of the, well, not the HOA ones, but these other ones, yes, definitely. The HOAs were in a separate, were in separate column. But review of lease lines, preliminary seller disclosure, information access was all tied to that one day. So now you can separate the days if you want to.
I thought the seller's closure was like 3 days.
Yeah, I thought it was 3 or 5 days for that.
No, in the contract, the seller disclosures are required to be what? How many days? 7 days.
Oh, 7 days.
So here's what I'm gonna tell you. I see a lot of agents being stupid with this. They'll say they leave the seller saying 7 days, but they write a 5-day inspection contingency. That means the sellers can give you the seller disclosures after you're supposed to release contingencies. That sounds super smart. So.
You have a question, John?
Yeah.
What did he say about nasty liens applied to tax bills?
This is, you notice here on L7, such as solar panels or propane tanks or PACE or zero liens. So when it's talking about leased or liened items, PACE and HERO liens are energy efficiency loans they did for firefighters and people in public service, but the lenders were, I don't know, they tricked, anyways. They put a second on the loan, but it's paid through the property tax bill. So no one really sees it because not actually, it's not actually a lien. And the part of the problem with the property tax bill is that always takes precedence. So in the event of foreclosure, if there's property taxes or other taxes owed, those always get paid first. The lender's always second. The reason the PACE and HERO trick people is they put them in the property tax bill. So their loan, even if the house defaults and goes into foreclosure, their loans will get paid off before the first lender gets paid off. And the lender, your buyer's lender will not take second position to these loans. So they will not do the loan unless the PACE or the PACE lien or HERO lien is done. And I've seen contracts where people try to get people to assume those loans, and your buyer cannot assume those loans. Your buyer's lender will not take second position on those loans. And so I've seen these tank transactions. I've actually done where on the buy side, they came back and they did this, and they didn't know. And they told the lady, the wife of the husband was a firefighter, the wife just did the loan, and they told her, oh, you don't even see the payments. Well, yeah, because they're in the property tax bill, right? They were in contract to buy a house, new home in Roseville on it. That HERO lien was $45,000. In the middle of the transaction, I'm like, you have this loan, you have to pay it off. They're like, no, you can assume it. No, you have to pay it off. This, and this. They're like, oh yeah. They ended up having to downgrade the size of their house. They were in a new home development, downgrade the size of the model lower because they didn't have the cash because they didn't know about the HERO lien or this PACE lien. So.
Is this where pre-opening escrow is beneficial?
Yes, go get the thing, because this will be, you'll find it in the property tax bill. The title will likely find it when they're doing a pre-lien, right? And sometimes if they were tricked, they don't even know what they got. They just, oh yeah, we did some energy upgrades. And if you go to a seller and they're like, oh yeah, we got a loan for energy upgrades, was not showing up in the tax report, you're like, then you need to be like, did you get a PACE lien?
John?
Yes.
Is that the same, solar systems are doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, anything energy efficient. So the crazy part is that 40,000 one they did a new water heater, they did a new AC cooling, which was like a water cooling energy efficient, and they put more insulation in the house. They didn't even put solar on, it was 45,000.
45,000 for just those things?
It was a joke.
That's like 20,000.
If you're lucky, so
Yeah.
it was a joke. They didn't read that, they didn't read the paper. They didn't read what they signed, is what they did. They just, yeah. Okay, seller buyer contingencies is still the same COP, yes.
Go back to that, you have one question.
Yes.
So the loan needs to be paid off before you can close, correct?
Yes,
And then-
the lender will not allow, they will not approve that loan.
And then how will you know if there is a HERO lien? At what point?
Title should find it.
Because when they pulled tax records, they can find it at that point, correct?
Yeah, even if there's no docs, the property, when they pull the property taxes, the taxes should be out of whack. That means normally they're 1.25%, but now they're 2.5% is because they put the payment in the loan. The payment in the property tax bill. So sometimes you'll catch it there. The time we did it, they didn't even tell us about it. They didn't even think about it. We only caught it because a property tax bill came up like really huge. And we're like, what's this? And then we figured out it was basically, and then we went back to them. We're like, oh yeah, I thought we didn't have to pay that. No, here you go. $40,000 later, right? Okay. Wow. COP, I think we know what contingency of sale by property, okay. Time of possession, all right, this has changed. Prior on the old contract, what was the time you could take possession of property?
5 p.m.
No.
6 p.m.
It was 6 p.m. on the day of recording. So if recorded at the morning recording time at 8 a.m., technically the seller could stay in the house till 6 p.m. on the old contract. And in fact, I've had that. So watch it. I've had people, they were getting kicked out of the house for moving. They're in a rental. They have to move out that day. Escrow got delayed. They get their movers there at 8 to move out. They record at 8. It's recorded. They already funded it, everything. Record the next morning, 8 o'clock. Confirmation recording. They get their movers. They get all the stuff. They show up at the house, and guess what happens? The sellers are there with their movers moving stuff out still. And they say, we'll be done at 5. And obviously the agent called me and said, John, what are we gonna do? I said, did you change that? No, they have till 6 p.m. They have till 6 p.m. I suggest you negotiate something. So literally I had to drive down, like it was in the tunnel. So I drove down and negotiated between the two agents, and they let us put the stuff in the garage first. Because the agent was gonna have to pay for the movers to stand there for that many hours until they could upload, right? So, they have changed this, now it's upon recordation. This can cut both ways. Great, I got it at 8 a.m., but then your seller needs to be out the day before. Right? So, now it defaults to recordation time. Okay, yes.
So can you have any control over when you record morning versus afternoon? Like if you definitely don't want a morning one, is there any way you can work with title? You know what I mean?
You can ask title.
You can ask title. So title is fiduciary to both parties.
And to be mutual agreement.
Yeah, so if you say, we don't want to record right now, now your buyers could issue a demand to close escrow, but you can hold it back if you want to. But I wouldn't hold it days like that.
So it's probably better to choose the 6 p.m. or something, so then that's like a known entity, a known
Up to
time.
you. Well, before it was, as a practice right now, as a practice, most agents practice upon recordation, right? We close, give me the keys, go over there, right? So we're practicing it. The reason they wrote it this way is agents are generally practicing at time of recordation, even with the 6 p.m. in there. So that's why they changed it. So I don't think it's gonna be a big change for people because that's what they've been doing before. But if your sellers are counting on 6 p.m. or something's happening, then you should not. You shouldn't even be advising your sellers of that anyways. You should be saying you need to move out prior to close, right? Yeah, so, all right. And just so you know, if you guys do a final walkthrough and they have not moved out, you should really be talking to the other side. I want you to know, a lot of people and they're like, John, we have this, they haven't moved out yet, we have to extend, what are we doing? I was like, well, did you do a final one? Yeah. Was all this other stuff in there? Yeah. Yeah, they didn't impact anything. I'm like, don't you think that warrant a conversation with the listing agent? They're like, well, I didn't think about that.
Don't you wanna see it with all this stuff not in it?
Exactly.
Like,
So-
at the last minute?
Okay. Seller occupied or vacant units, close of escrow date or check. So if you're gonna do a rent back now they've cleared up the rent back because there's been so many rent backs. If it's 29 days or fewer, you check that box, you put the days in there, and it's gonna give you a car form SIP. If you check that box and it's more than 30 days, you're gonna do a car form RLAS. This will populate into the contract already. Now I'm gonna tell you a few things. If it's 20, the reason they delineate between 29 days or less is because California law. Okay? If you do a rental for less than 29 days, we call that a license. That means you don't, all the laws that kick in for eviction, tenant landlord law, it connects in at 30 days. So if it's less than 30 days, you're under license law, which is a lot easier. So when you guys buy a ticket to go to see Trans-Siberian Orchestra at Golden One Arena, you're actually getting a license to rent that seat for 4 hours. And they can revoke it. There's a lot of things you can do. You can revoke it, you can do a lot of things. If they damage the house, you can do it, right? So under a SIP, if you notice it says any damage to the property while they're occupying, the seller has to pay, the previous seller has to pay for it. Under the RALS, so I had this example, ready? Now when you go 30 days or more, tenant law kicks in.
It's like the full-on lease,
Like landlord,
right?
the buyer is a landlord, the seller is a tenant. And I had this for example. We had this happened in our office. There was a 30-day rent back. They did a RLAS. During the escrow time, they did inspection, water heater's working fine. All the way through, water heater's working fine. Seller, 30-day rent back. Seller goes to move out, says, oh, the water heater stopped working. They come and we're on the buy side, buyer comes to me, what can we do? Can we make them fix it? I go, no, you have a RALAS. You're 30 days. You're the landlord, they're the tenant. Who pays for a water heater when something breaks if you're a landlord? The landlord. Buyer, you're stuck on it.
Back past 29 days, I won't let my clients go.
So if they want a 30-day rent back, I highly recommend you put 29 days and do a SIP. Because it's gonna make your seller, it's gonna be a lot easier to handle things with your seller. You can say, no, you have to fix the seller, right? Because it's not an actual rental tenant situation. If you do a contract, we will require these. So you can't just, I see it often in counter offers, we will require that you do these forms. Questions?
So it'd be better to even make escrow 1 day longer and keep it at 29 days.
For real. So I would like,
Always.
can we do a 31-day escrow and a 29-day rent back? Yeah, let's do that. Exactly. Okay. Tenant occupied properties. Now, C10 Occupied Property Addendum. They have made a new form, TOPA. This deals. Previously, it used to say at time of possession, if there was a tenant in the property, the tenant's going to vacate the property prior to close. It said in there, the seller had to get the tenant out 5 days prior to close so that the buyer can go and do a final walkthrough with the property vacant. It said that in there. And they have taken that out. Now it's on the TOPA form. So you got to go to the TOPA form and you can check all those boxes. I want, right. So you can check, I want to move it. Now, CAR has also changed. Most people would only use check that box if the tenant was going to stay in the property. I'm an investor. I'm going to buy the property, keep the tenant in the property. Now, they want you to use the TOPA form for even if the tenant is in the property now, but they're going to move out, you want the TOPA form. And the TOPA form is better because we get a lot of the reason they do is we get a lot of disputes. Is I'll buy the house. Oh, don't worry, I gave 60-day notice to the tenant, right? We do a 60-day escrow. They're going to move out. And guess what happens? The tenant doesn't move out. What do? Now the buyer wants to close. They're stuck, right? And they're like, hey, we'll credit you $1,500 in case you have to evict them, right? And now we're all like in this weird where your buyer's now a landlord. They're trying to get the tenant out. They may have to evict them, but they need the house and they can't move, and it's all kind of messed up, right? So TOPA clears that up. So if there's a tenant in the property, even if they're planning to move out, do the TOPA form because it will help you delineate all those issues. It says, what happens if the tenant doesn't move out? Escrow extended, or seller has to pay to remove.
Do you think they made that form because of the current?
Yeah, they made it. Because we were all complaining like, this is all messed up, right? Yeah. Trust me, I see these disputes all
Because
the
there was
time.
nowhere to put it, like if a tenant was staying in the property as a rent back, so it's not a seller in possession, it was like.
Yeah, the previous agreement said, hey, seller, you may be in breach of contract if you don't have it vacant 5 days prior to close. That's what the old contract says. Well, the seller's like, I told them. I want to breach a contract because my tenant won't listen to what I say and I'm following California law, right? So now it's like, what do we do, right? So the TOPA spells it out. Any questions on TOPA? Okay, this is where you're talking about seller delivered documents in still 7 days, right? You as a listing agent are required to give your seller disclosures to the buyers within 7 days. You are trying, this is new, sign and return escrow holder provision instructions within 5 days. Did you know that escrow takes your contract and makes escrow instructions? And they send them to the buyer and seller to sign. And did you know that escrow instructions govern the escrow, not the contract? And actually, if the escrow instructions are different from what the contract says, you know who wins? Escrow instructions. So they're saying you must sign in 5 days because some buyers were lollygagging around and they say, oh, we never had a contract, we never had escrow instructions. You might deposit that. So 5 days. Time to pay fees for ordering HOA. This is always the same, but it was kind of buried in the document. It says, seller, how quickly do you got to pay for the docs? I would highly recommend because they are a disclosure item, contingency that you do them up front when you list, because the seller has to pay anyways. This is new. Remember, it used to say seller buyer paying for a smoke detector, carbon monoxide water heater bracing. Now it actually puts a day time. It says seller, you will make sure these are there within 7 days. And this is important because we'll talk about another contract on 10B, another provision. And I know this happens, what if they say, well, seller's going to do it, but your appraiser goes out and says what?
It's not there.
The COs are not there, right? Now they say, now I got to pay, now I'm going to come back, but it's a $150 extra appraisal and reinspection charge to the buyer. Do this, right? And this happens a lot. So now there's this. It says seller, you have 7 days. And now, we'll go over it later, but there's a provision that says, buyer, if I do it, and if I incur a reinspection charge because you do it, I can actually charge you. Seller has to pay for it. All right. Evidence of representative authority. Yeah, so when I practice real estate day to day, I literally have a box of smoke detectors and I have a box of carbon in my trunk at all times. And if I ran out, I stopped at Home Depot and bought a box. Now I know it's expensive because I'm like $20 each, right? I get it, but like I just had it. And if they didn't, I'm like, here, put them up. Here's two, one up there, one right there. Okay. Before we take photos, I want those up, right? I literally would. Because I'm like, my gift to you, here you go, right? So, because you need to get them.
Yeah.
Evidence reference, so we're getting a lot of evidence, we're getting a lot of RCSDs out there where people are representing entities to buying. I think, Lansing, we had a dispute on that. Our recent,
It wasn't a dispute, it was clarification.
okay, it was a clarification.
Oh,
So, do you mind if I say this to you?
no,
Okay.
because we did the right thing. We always do.
We all do the right thing, yes, you do. So Anthony, we're like trying to figure this out because there's a trust with a trustee, and the trustee had power of attorney. Someone had power of attorney for the trustee to sign on behalf of the trustee for the trust. So it says, oh, you're gonna need two RCSDs, and I was like, one for the trustee to say, I'm the trustee of the trust, and then another one that says, I'm power of attorney for the trustee, right? But then we found out the trustee's dead.
Wait. The trustee's dead?
The trustee's dead. And then we have power of attorney. But then the power of attorney says, on the power of attorney that says, this power of attorney lasts even after I die. Literally it says it on there.
In bold.
In bold. And John was like, this? And I was like, you can't have a power of attorney after death. Like the perfect person you're representing to sign is dead.
Even
They
if the
can't.
contract states it.
Even though the power of attorney written states it, it violates California law. It cannot be that way. And actually, the fact that it has it in there makes it an invalid POE from the very beginning. Actually, if they put that in there, state law says it's a void contract from the very beginning. So technically, anything the power of attorney before would be. Yes. But make sure you get your evidence of authority. Don't just rely on what they say. Actually get the docs. A lot of you say, oh, escrow will take care of it. If we would have gone down and let escrow take care of it, we would have blown this transaction up in the middle of escrow 40 days down the road, right? So. This is fun. Now we're on to page 3, P1. Remember those leased items, leased included? Remember stove? Right, stove, refrigerator, washer, dryer. Well, we expanded it because, man, do we get a lot of disputes on what next. Yeah, so if you notice, the only thing checked on here is what?
So that's always checked?
So there's been disputes because sometimes people will hang these nice mirrors, but they're hanging on the wall. And the seller takes it like, no, that's mine. So automatically we figured the only thing realtors could agree on is that the bathroom mirror stays. Everything else should be negotiable.
Even the stove?
Stove has always been, that's why you always have to check stove. Stove under California law is considered a detached item, unless it's a cooktop, But if it's a standalone stove, even if it's hooked up with gas and a plug, doesn't matter, it's a detached item. So that's why you always gotta check stove.
Doesn't it say requires the
Yes, that's why everyone checks stove, because all appraisals, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and FHA require a stove to be there. They require two things on appraisal, a stove and a heat source. Those two things. So that's why every agent checks stove. So no matter what, you should be checking stove unless it's a total cash offer. Alright. But you see, refrigerator, wine refrigerators, right? Washer dryers, dishwashers, microwaves. Dishwashers are considered attached by 2 screws right at the front of here.
So a microwave, what if it's like a countertop microwave? If you check microwave, does that include a countertop microwave?
Yes, if they have a countertop microwave and you say included, it includes that microwave on the counter.
Yeah, but you don't have to specify countertop, just any microwaves.
Correct.
Okay.
That's why it's microwaves.
Oh, so there's one in the kid's bedroom, that one comes too, or
Yeah,
something?
all the microwaves come,
Okay.
unless you wanna exclude it. You can exclude it like kids microwave in bedroom, no, right? So,
So built-in
Easy bake
microwave
oven.
is not automatic.
built-in microwave is automatic, but it's just to say if you wanted a standalone microwave.
And a dishwasher's not built in?
Have you ever seen a dishwasher, done an inspection, and they pull it out and it rocks?
Mine does that right now.
Legally, it's not attached. Right now, because the only thing that attaches it, have you ever installed a dishwasher? The only thing that attaches it is 2 screws, right at the front. Have anyone done it? 2 screws. If those screws are not in, the dishwasher is not attached.
Oh my God.
John,
So if your thing rocks, you're probably not attached, right? So, yes.
on the stove, this is when I was in real estate before. If you change out the stove, you make sure that you put a note that that stove won't be there, because you're gonna lose in court.
Yes, you'll lose in court. You can't change anything. You can't change the condition of the home after time of offer. If you do, you must get buyer approval. That's not just the stove, that's anything.
Well, yeah, you can't like say you're gonna give the fridge.
This is where the most of the disputes were happening. Video doorbells. You know how many stupid Ring doorbells? We're in a Ring doorbell dispute right now.
Oh my God. Just
So
buy
they
them
took
a
off the
new
Ring
one.
and put back the old doorbell, right? They're like, no! So now the contract, even though that's California law, is saying it's attached. So California law says it's attached, right? In the contract, we as realtors have decided that those go with the seller. The video doorbells, security cameras, security alarms other than separate video doorbell, smart home control devices, wall-mounted brackets for video audio equipment. Now, this is a change. Before, you used to have it where, so you had a wall-mounted TV. Under the old contract, the TV is considered not attached, but the bracket is attached. And the bracket would stay. And then you could check a box that says, no, take the bracket, but patch the holes but don't paint them. That's what it said, right? Yeah. Now they've changed it. The whole thing goes. And they have to patch the holes. The bracket and the TV go, and they have to patch the holes. This includes, sometimes you'll have surround sound systems that are not built in, but they're attached on brackets in the corner of the wall. That means now the speaker and the bracket go. And they gotta patch the holes.
They are supposed to. patch
According to the
holes?
contract, yeah. If you go to 9, it'll say you gotta patch the
But
holes.
don't have to repaint it. Yep.
Not to paint them,
Painting.
you gotta patch them.
Unless they check it.
If they check it, that means it stays. Then they don't have to take it down.
And then they don't have to patch
They don't have to patch
it.
it, because it's there. So if your buyer's like, whoa, this social media room is awesome, I love the surround sound, and you notice on brackets, you better start checking some boxes. Yeah, you better start checking some boxes. All right. So now, this is a change from the old one, brackets used not to be included. Now they are included. So the default is they take the device and the bracket and patch the holes now. That's the default. Above ground pool spas. Electric car charging stations. This was big. We have our Teslas here. I paid $2,000 for my charger. I'm taking it with me. So we are considering that detached. We're considering the seller can take it. So if your buyer's like, oh, I got a Tesla, he's got a Tesla charger that's perfect, you better check the box. Potted trees and shrubs. All right. If you love all the foliage and you notice there's a lot of pots, you better check it because it's going to look barren afterwards. Any questions on that? And then you can exclude items.
I saw it off the street, I can't believe it. They have to move it out.
I've literally had I've had disputes. Listen, in my own transaction, the buyer took a fountain that was concreted to the ground, like a fountain. They've taken a tree, they dug the tree out and took it. They took blinds, not like curtains, but blinds.
I'm surprised I don't know why.
Did you dispute that?
I did. And literally, I forced them, or I said, we're gonna sue you. And they brought a truck, and the buyer's agent, I was buyer's agent, and the listing agent were there. And we were there to mitigate everything that we found. I checked it off, okay, found it back. I said they could keep the tree,
So the smart home control devices, like a Nest thermostat,
smart home control device. So I don't know about you, but like, I have a security system and I have something near my bed that you can turn it on and turn it off. So that would transfer with the property. Or it would not if you don't check that box, right? But if you want to transfer, you need to check it, yes.
The new contract doesn't specify that the items included are transferred without any cost or warranty. We've had this issue in the past where lenders require it.
Yes.
So do we have to write it down now since it's not here?
Yes, I would recommend, not here, but yeah, I would recommend in other terms that all things that are transferred, personal property that is transferring with this contract are come with no warranty and at no cost, right? So, and don't mess up your loan, that's why. Don't mess up the appraisal. That's what it is. Any questions on that? Excluding items, what?
What's the verbiage you got on that? Hold on.
You can see like the refrigerator is transferring to the buyer from the seller with no warranty and at no cost to the buyer.
In section 9, John, does it say that?
It doesn't say that.
It does not say it?
I don't believe it says. Allocation of costs, we have natural hazard disclosure report, buyer, seller, both. Environmental, other provided by. Okay. You should go Cap City NHD, everyone. I'm seeing a lot of you not. It helps your profit share. 48% of all the dollars that go to Cap City NHD are profit share to all of you. And a lot of you are not writing, they're giving it to some third-party company that costs more money. So you're charging your sellers more for it. You're not making any money on it. Because, and I know most of you, who can name their NHD rep? Exactly. So you're giving money to an NHD rep you don't even know when you could be potentially getting 48% of it back through profit share and at a cheaper cost for your seller. They wanted to get away from 50-50 splits because you're all running a 50-50 split, 50-50 split, 50-50 split. So now they have buyer, seller, or both.
It's not the same. Both is 50-50, less words.
There's just less words. You don't have to write. They're trying to get you to write less words. So this is new. Remember we talked about smoke alarms? They have to do it 7 days. This says who pays for it.
Seller.
So now according to this, if you mark seller on 7 days, the seller would have 7 days to rectify those situations. And if they don't, and later on it causes the buyer cost, the seller will have to pay for those costs. Government inspection reports. What are government inspection reports? And corrective remedial actions. You guys all. This is all I get.
Like your sewer lateral certs and Davis resale.
Yeah. So in Woodland, you have to do
Fire
sprinkler inspection, mandatory. In Davis, your building department must do a review, inspection of your home for all permit violations, which inevitably you find like 15.
And most of them have
Yeah. And in the East Bay, you have to do sewer lateral inspections because a lot of times the sewer laterals just went across the properties and then go back, so they make you put it in there. So sometimes like a $20,000 cost to fix it, right? Those are government required point of sale inspections. Okay. This says who's going to pay for the inspections. This says if it finds something wrong, who's paying for the fixes? So you need to know your areas. It's very important. If you leave those blank, and I've had this dispute, they're in Davis, it's blank. We get the inspection, there's stuff that needs to be done. So I was like, you didn't say so, let's do it 50-50. When if they just said seller, they probably would have got the offer accepted anyway. But because they left it blank, 50-50, buyer's agent wrote a check because the buyer's like, what the hell? Okay. Escrow fees, buyer, seller, both, each to pay their own fees. They give you a different option. Sometimes the seller fees are more than the buyer's fees. So for example, in John Lansing's situation with his buyer, he has a trustee. They're probably going to charge him more because they're going to have like to do a trustee cert. They're going to have to do a death certificate. They're going to have to do additional recording to remove the old trustee and put the new trustee in. What?
No, because we have a copy of the trustees, trust documents.
Okay. Okay. Well, whatever. I'm just saying, even with the trust, he's probably going to have more fees on the sell side than the buy side. So if you did both, this split 50-50. If you put each pay their own fees,
Like that.
then it's whatever the escrow charges each person. Clear?
So it would be less to the buyer if you clicked to pay their own fees.
It could be.
It could be,
Just depending.
although the buyer could have more, right?
So how would you know what would be best to do?
Off escrow. Escrow lists all their fees. But I will say, it is more likely that the seller will have more fees than the buyer. It is highly more likely. Highly more likely. Because they'll have like a low tie-in fee, like the buyer side has a low tie-in fee, but the seller may have a payoff fee, right? So a lot of stuff. So, okay. Others title, oh, we're not there. Oh, almost there, almost there. Other owners title, buyer, seller, both. They put it in here, buyer's lender title insurance policy, buyer. It is written in there already, but just so you know, there is a lender's title insurance. It's usually paid by the buyer. That's why it defaults there. Title and escrow company is written here. Escrow holder's there. So, CAR is asking that you stop using seller's choice. So because that becomes very unclear, and actually, we see them on home warranties like seller's choice, and actually there's a home warranty company that named themselves seller's choice.
I saw an opportunity.
Who can get mad at that?
So if a home warranty did it, are you gonna think escrow's gonna do it? Yeah, so.
Oh my God.
Is it shady or smart?
It's both. In the best way.
So, usually you should be talking to the listing agent and find out where they want escrow, or if you want your own escrow, write your own escrow in, right? County transfer tax, city transfer tax. Which cities have transfer tax? Who else? That's the only city sector. Just so you know, it's not county, it's only city. The city, there's parts of Sacramento that have Sacramento addresses that are not part of the city and not subject to transfer. HOA fees, just so you know, the seller is required by law to pay the HOA fee for prepping disclosures and the certification fees. The transfer fees, however, are negotiable. So, and it says here, if the HOA charges a move-out fee that is separate from the move-in fee, those will be separated. Clear as mud? Private transfer fees, typically seller pays, or check buyer both. So it's default to seller, which should be.
What are the private transfer fees?
There are some places that have private transfer fees. For example, there's a small development here in North Potomac. Whenever they do a development, they have to do environmental mitigation. That means they have to say, we're building homes and we're taking away the lizard's heart. So most developers and builders will pay that fee to do something else. So usually they'll say, we'll put money toward a fund, and all the developers in this. So when Natomas did their Natomas Park, most of the developers put money into this fund and they bought this land, and now there's going to be, and they donated it to a conservation company that's just going to make it permanently open, right? So that's the way we can mitigate it. We're going to keep that open because we're doing this. Well, there's one in there that said, I don't want to get to that fund. I'm going to make the buyers pay for it. So they put a thing as they made a deal with a company that plants trees for environmental purposes. And they said, every time a house sells in this development for the next 30 years, the seller's got to pay a $120 fee to this tree company so they can plant a tree.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know,
It'd only be by title. Title will find it. Those would be according to the, that's why it's marked seller. So. A home warranty. I've asked Yvonne to step up here because home warranty is getting quite more messy these days.
Unfortunately.
Obviously, CAR didn't consult the home warranty company.
No, they did not. And we have lobbyists that have been getting us on this for years, but no, they didn't consult us. And if I were to open up my own home warranty company, I would call it Seller's Choice. I actually think that's brilliant. You have no idea how many contracts that I see that ends under NHD, also Seller's Choice.
Seller's Choice, yeah.
Escrow pick, it's just crazy. But so that is actually why I want to talk to you guys for a few minutes. I actually made myself a couple of small copies, and John was with my coworker last week, and they got to talking about it. Like he just said, it's going to get a little messy on you guys. So please pay attention. The old contract actually had a couple of boxes that you could check that would say,
Upgrade.
air conditioning,
Yeah.
swimming pool, upgrade. It's missing now. So it's gonna be up to you guys to please write in your contract what your buyer wants. If you're representing the buyer, only you and the buyer know what you want. There's no way for, your TC, escrow officer, me, anybody to know if it's just saying cost not to exceed $700. No way to know that, what kind of coverage.
Does Fidelity have maybe like an order form that would put it on the buyer?
It's in the brochure,
Okay.
and then I actually brought some little, price sheets that I'll leave right there on top of the shelf for this week and next week, but there is an order form in there. So, and I'm glad you're in here. So if you're gonna, there's a couple of title companies I already know that are no longer gonna order home warranties at all. A few of them have done that in the past. There's a few escrow officers who by choice say, I don't wanna order it, because they don't wanna be responsible come July when your people call up and say, hey, how come they're not fixing my pool? Because it wasn't written. It wasn't written there. So please, only you know, so just write in there, and it expands. That's gonna expand. You can type as much as you want. I want the wine refrigerator, I want the kitchen refrigerator, I want the garage refrigerator, the swimming pool, the extra hot, I mean, fill in all the blanks. And then as far as the part where, who's paying for it, buyer, seller, or both. And then on page 7, John hasn't gotten to that yet,
Yeah.
but it specifically talks about that too. If the cost exceeds what the seller is contributing, then it goes to the buyer. So it's messy, but unless, Jenny, if you're ordering it all by yourself, you're checking all the boxes and you know what you're doing. If you call me and we discuss it, I'll order exactly what you say. But when, your transaction coordinator or an escrow officer that's still willing to do it gets a copy of this, and it just says not to exceed $650, they're gonna send it to me, and the first thing I have to wonder is it a house? Is it a duplex? Is it a condo? I can look those up. And in our area, I know everything needs air conditioning unless it specifically says no air conditioning. But after that, what do you want me to do with that $600? I don't know. I'll use it on something. They might have a wine refrigerator coverage, but no, that's not. So anyway, we gotta kind of work together on this. It'll all work itself out, but, then I was gonna say this, and then I can leave this with you if you want, but as soon as you get an order, like Jenny, whoever orders for you, usually through me, you get an email confirmation that says, your Fidelity warranty has been ordered, here's the contract number. Check it for me. Make sure the buyer's name is spelled correct, but check the coverage. Only Leon, only you know that you meant to tell SB to please add swimming pool. So I can't help you. Can't help you guys.
Yvonne and her colleague, they often order these for you, and
Yeah, we do.
they're assuming things. So she's had disputes where like the pool is toast. We need new pool equipment. They put a number in. They didn't talk to them or anything about that, and then it did get ordered without the pool because the pool would exceed the cost.
Mhm. Yeah. So we
And so
need
they
the
ordered it
words.
without the pool, and they sent emails saying, do you want this included? It looks like there's a pool, but never responded, and then
Yeah.
boom, close. Buyer's like, the pool's broken, where's my home warranty? They're like, you're not covered. They're like, agent.
Yeah. So your angry buyer calls you,
Yeah.
and then you call me going, oh my God, Yvonne, what happened? And it will say, this is what it said. It's truly the buyer's responsibility, like any insurance. You can't call your dentist and use dental insurance if you didn't check the box when you bought your medical insurance. You can't call your car insurance to get your windshield repaired when you didn't check the box for the windshield insurance. So it's the same with us. And you guys will get angry at me, but I'll have to still say no. I can't help you. Can't help you with that pool coverage, down the road.
And that's what I want to say because I was talking and it gets messy now. Before you check some boxes, you know if the pool's there, you know if the refrigerator's there. Now you don't.
Yeah.
So what I need you guys to do is be more savvy about your home warranties. When I was practicing the other day, I literally had a brochure at my home office and had a brochure at my desk at my work office, because I literally would look up, this is the cost, this is what I need, so I write that number in this correctly. You don't know how many times agents have wrote checks because they're like, I thought the seller was paying for the home warranty. And you're like, oh yeah, I forgot to put the pool money in, so that the buyer's now like, why is there $300 for a home warranty? And the buyer's writing a check like, oh yeah, I'm gonna reimburse you for that because I messed up because I put the low amount in. Right, so.
I was just sitting there ordering one a couple minutes ago for, one of my regular agents, the amount, it's the old contract, but the amount still said $650, and I thought that was weird, maybe it's a duplex. Turns out that it was actually 2 houses on 1 lot. That's 2 different coverage, she exceeded by $200. So what she guesstimated. So I'm gonna leave this, and SB, the brochure actually has a full,
Form for the buyer to fill out.
a form for the buyer.
And put upgraded, because there's different levels.
Yeah.
We had issues with that where they only put a number in for the standard and then they had a repair, but half the repairs wasn't covered and they had to pay $600 extra because it wasn't covered, but it would have been covered on the upgraded. Do
Maybe that form is to be made into a template or something, I'm sure it could, I don't know how to do anything like that. That's why John's looks like that and mine looks like this. But anyway, I'm gonna leave these, this is actually just a real easy plan list, what the different plans are called, all the extra options. I'm gonna leave them over there, they've all been in your mailbox at one time or another.
And on the issue,
You guys have all got these.
on the issue buy, if you put seller's choice, there is a seller's choice home warranty company.
Yeah. Up here, they probably still call me, but down south, that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
So, you guys, I'm here to help you, I don't wanna ever have to, look at Jenny and go like this, sorry, your client gets nothing.
Right.
But that's
What'll happen?
We only did that one time, and it was my fault. It was my fault.
But you hate for it to be your fault, right?
We forgot to order, so that's a good practice to actually call you or whoever your rep is and just, clarify the home warranty, because it will remind you, like, we had a situation where I thought my TC ordered it, she thought we didn't get it ordered, and of course, as soon as the buyer moves in, something breaks, I'm like, oh my God.
And I wanna know, because we're auditing and we ask for the home warranty coverage if it says in there. And I get blown up by TCs all the time. Why do we need this? Why do we need this? Because of that.
Yeah.
Because they don't order the home warranty.
I like to learn everything the hard way, so.
Me too, but I won't be here, like I told you, I won't be able to be here next Monday. So, but you guys, I'll help you any way I can.
But just so you know, it is clear now. Before, escrow was unclear about any cost overages, how that worked. Now it says specifically the buyer pays any overage.
And that's gonna be on page 7, he'll get to that here in 4 more pages.
We got 16 pages now?
Don't worry, it's very easy. 16 pages now. Don't worry, it goes a lot faster.
You'll get a break here for coffee soon.
So the first 3 pages are generally where you're gonna be playing much. Yes.
To John, on Q16 and Q17, can you write if needed?
If needed? For what?
The question.
I wouldn't write anything in there unless you're asking them to pay a specific cost. The only thing I'd recommend, so a lot of people are asking, like, I have a VA loan, I need pest inspection and pest clearance, right? So I'd recommend at the beginning you write for reports, right here, you write for a pest inspection under Q2, right here. Q2, Q3, you write for the pest inspection, and then down. Get over there. And I won't go. So on Q16, 17, you would put pest clearance. Clear? This is so if you're asking the seller to pay for something that's defined, you put it here. Okay, probate. Property addendums. Remember we used to have all these backup offers.
Sorry, so
What?
you said Q16, Q17, that's for the clearance?
That's where you ask them to pay something. So a lot of agents were putting, like, it says report and trying to put the pest clearance there. That's for reports, inspections. Now we know we don't put inspections in there normally, right?
Right.
Because if we do, the underwriter's gonna ask for a copy and blow up your loan, trust me. It's not pretty.
So then why would you put it in there?
For VA, I think.
For VA.
Yeah, for VA law, because VA requires customary. Whatever, I've been on listings, I've had agents give the pest inspection to the underwriter just to try and make it a lender required.
But you don't work with that agent anymore.
No, well, I was gonna blow up this, and now we're canceling, you can't, that's not agreed, we're not agreeing to this. And then the agent ended up paying for the repairs. The buyer's agent. The buyer's like, I never gave him the report. He's like, I wanna buy the house, why did you do that? Okay, on to, approach 3 is gonna be the most of the stuff you're gonna work on. I'm just gonna now go over, this is all the wording. I'm only gonna go over now what was added new to the contract, okay? So that was, think about it, you're gonna put all your stuff in the first 3 pages now. Now we're gonna go over contract now. Probably didn't notice probate, manufactured home, stock cooperative. They've eliminated a couple RPAs. There used to be a probate addendum, probate RPA. There used to be a manufactured home RPA. Those are going away. So if you have a probate or manufactured home or regular RPA, this covers all 3 of those. You just need to check that box for your appropriate issue, and it will add a new addendum that has all the specific details for that purchase contract that you normally would. Clear?
Cool.
Okay. And this is TOPA.
Put it on white.
It's not supposed to be.
I know, it's supposed to default over here, but it doesn't want to. I blame Carney. Oh, there. Good, okay. What is it? They added it, so normally there was backup offer done, septic well, short sale, court confirmation, and court confirmation can be different than probate, just FYI. So, and they added this one in, buyer intent to exchange, seller intent to exchange. If your buyer or seller is doing a 1031 exchange, they need to disclose that. Before, most people didn't know there was even 1031 exchange forms for disclosure. There are. So instead of writing them in, you would check the box and use the form. Okay. Let's talk about regular ones. So the buyer inspection, wire fraud, unfair housing, and privacy are all there already, right? Part of your contract. But now they added a wild disaster advisory form. This is not a required form. This is if your seller has been impacted by a wildfire. If they were forced to evacuate or came close to their property, you need to disclose that.
That's all in California.
Yeah, basically, if you're out of a major city area, and say, have you ever been evacuated? Has a fire come close to your house? They say yes. Wildfire disaster advisory.
Or flood?
What?
Flood.
Well, that's not a wildfire.
No,
Flood is a flood.
Is there one for flood there? People move because of flood, right?
Well, the flood is not there because flood is under NHD, so wildfire, but this is saying, but there's no flood one. But if you was flooded, you need to disclose that, right, on the TV. But trust, REO, state by buyer, seller advisor, short sale, and probate advisory as well. Okay. I just want to point this part out. Buyer shall deliver deposit directly if method other than the wire transfer is specified in paragraph 3D. Any submit is unacceptable to the escrow holder, then upon notice of escrow, delivery shall be by wire transfer. So,
Yeah, that's what you said.
yeah. So, all right. I want to do this one. Retention of deposit. Paragraph 29, initial by all parties otherwise incorporated into this agreement specifies a remedy for buyer's default. Buyer and seller advised to consult with a qualified real estate attorney before adding any other clause specifying a remedy such as release of or forfeiture of deposit or making of a deposit non-refundable for buyer to complete the purchase. Any such clause shall be deemed invalid unless a clause independently satisfies the statutory liquid damage requirement set forth in civil code. Okay, we're seeing this a lot. And so Carl wanted to fix this. How many of you seen, we're going long on the escrow. Seller's frustrated. Seller says, I'll extend escrow, but release the deposit to me. Right?
Yeah.
Have you seen that? Have you done that?
No.
That violates California law.
Yeah.
the seller cannot take possession of the buyer's deposit. That is illegal. And when you do it, you're actually breaking the law. The seller's breaking the law. Actually, the listing agent and the seller are breaking the law. So the reason they put this in there was saying it is not valid. Any request is not valid. It is considered a breach of civil code. You cannot take the buyer's default without the buyer's deposit prior to closing. Clear? John's like, what the heck? Are you okay over there, man? So if your seller really wants to do that, you need to say you need to talk to an attorney because it violates California Civil Code. If you force the buyer, if there's a requirement by the seller to force the buyer to forfeit the deposit to them for a future close during escrow, that is a violation of California Civil Code. You want to say something?
I just want to clarify something.
Yes.
If the buyer remove all contingencies and sign box number 3 or check box number 3, this still has to apply?
What do you mean?
I'm sorry.
No, this only applies to saying if as a requirement to close, the seller requires the buyer to forfeit the deposit to them. That is illegal.
But it's got nothing to do with removing the contingency.
No, it doesn't have anything to that. It says, if you as a seller, we need additional 15 days to close, we're having problems with the loan, our seller's frustrated, how about you release the deposit to us and we get to keep it if you don't close? Illegal.
Yeah.
I don't make the law, I just say what the law is, right? That is violation of civil code in California. Okay. I do want to point out one thing, buyer's loan status. This is new, okay? We're right here on C3. Buyer authorized seller and seller's authorized agent to contact the buyer's lender to determine the status of the buyer's loan specified in paragraph B or alternate loan buyer pursues whether or not a contingency of this agreement is in place. Sorry. If the contract entered to the buyer's lender is different from that provided in the terms of paragraph 6B, buyer shall deliver an updated contract within 1 day of seller's request. So this is now saying listing agent can talk to the buyer's lender and get status updates, even if there's no loan contingency.
That's totally fair.
And if you change lenders, the seller can say, give me the new buyer lender's information, and you must give it within 1 day. But I will say one thing, let's talk about buyer stated financing. This has been the same since the old contract, but I'd like to point it out because most people don't know. Sellers relying on the buyer's reputation of the type of financing specified, but not including but limited to applicable cash, down payment, and contingency. The seller has agreed to a specific closing date, purchase price, and to sell the buyer and relies on the buyer's specified finance. Buyer shall pursue the financing specified agreement, even if the buyer elects to pursue alternative forms of financing. The seller has no obligation to cooperate with the buyer's effort to obtain any financing other than specified in the agreements, but shall not interfere with the closing of the purchase price on the closing, even if it's based on alternative financing. Buyer's inability to obtain alternative financing does not excuse the buyer from the obligation of purchase property and close this specified.
So you can't say cash and then go get a loan.
Correct.
Okay.
If there's any documents from changing loans or getting a loan that require the seller to put a signature on a document that they wouldn't otherwise have to, they don't have to do it. So for example, if you go from conventional to FHA, what do they got to sign? The FHA mandatory clause, right? Seller says, no, I don't want to sign it. You can't do the loan, close the loan without it. You must have that signed.
Also fair.
Buyer can say no, seller can say no. Go back or cancel. You don't have to, you can say, I don't sign it, but seller has it. Any questions on that? Okay. This is new part here, so. We're going to talk here, condition of property at closing. Unless otherwise the party shall deliver it as is present as condition, which is normal. The property the property including stalls, landscaping, and grounds is to be maintained in substantially the same condition as the set, as all debris, personal property not included the cell shall be removed by close of escrow at the time possession is delivered by, if not, on the same date. If items are not removed when the possession is delivered to the buyer, all items are being deemed abandoned. So if they leave the Mustang, classic Mustang in the garage at close,
Abandoned.
it's abandoned. The buyer gets it if they want it. This is clarifying because we had a lot of disputes on this. This was not there before. So now this is saying under the contract that the seller leaves anything at the house after close is considered buyer's property at that point.
Even one day after?
What? And now we close at recordation. Records at 8 a.m. in the morning. If 8 a.m. there's stuff in the house, they deemed it abandoned. Oh, we have 3 questions about it, yes.
What if the buyer doesn't want the car with $1,000 in back fees?
Exactly. What? Yeah. Okay, I'll get to that. What else? Is that the same question?
Similar, basically buyer has till 6 p.m. to move out, grabbing everything that's abandoned, right? Assuming they close that one.
No. Well, now it's upon recordation.
So in my case, like, the listing agent had it staged, and they didn't have any of their furniture, any of the staging furniture in every room removed at the time of
It's
closing.
considered abandoned.
Right?
So.
What if it's a third party? What if it's like a third party?
I think seller's liable for those fees. and
Yeah, the
that.
lies will be liable for those fees. Yeah, they'll say, seller, you have to pay.
Buyer and seller, they can negotiate and have whoever come in and take it what they're want.
Well, yeah, just communicate.
Okay,
Yeah,
so-
with the agents, like, you
Wait,
already
wait,
know.
Buyer, after first delivering the seller written notice to remove items within 3 days. So they abandoned them, but I don't want them.
So you better take care of it.
Buyer, like, I don't want your junker car in my backyard. I thought you were gonna remove it, right? He says, remove items within 3 days, may pay to have such items removed or disposed of, and may bring legal actions per this item agreement to receive reasonable cost from the seller. So this is all new. It's saying, hey, if I gotta pay $3,000 to trash out your debris, because you didn't do it, and I give you a letter 3 days ahead of time, I have the right to go to small claims court and get my money, to sue you and get my money back.
Boom.
And it says here, buyer strongly advised to conduct investigations of the entire property or determine present condition. Seller agents may not be aware of all defects of the property, other factors of buyers. Property improvements may not be built accordingly to the current law. They all have required permits to finalize, so that's important too. That's new as well. So not everything's permitted. But I want you to know this, and if you go in your library, if you go, you got your forms and zip forms. If you actually open up the libraries, there'll be other libraries you can have. One of those is letters. It's called card letters. And in that letters form library, there is a sample letter for this 3-day letter. So the seller's like, buyer's like, there's stuff in here, I want to get it. He says, we got to give the buyers a notice 3 days, sellers a notice 3 days, written letter, that we're going to trash it, that we're going to trash it 3 days to get it, or we're going to trash it and charge them and sue them.
This is after the close of escrow?
After close of escrow.
3 days.
The condition of
And
property.
you said it's located in.
It's called the car letter library, and it's in your zip forms. So you'll have, you guys must know, but you're defaulted into the library with all the forms. But they have other library groups of stuff and other documents. And you just go to your library and change it to letters, and then you'll see those.
I like it. I can be a lawyer without being.
You like it? You like it? Like you like it? Okay. Okay. On loans, I want to point this. If there is no appraisal contingency or the appraisal contingency has been waived or removed, then failure of the property to appraise at the purchase price does not entitle the buyer to exercise the cancellation right pursuant to the loan contingency, if the buyer otherwise qualified for the loan. What's it say? So we got some people trying to be tricky, and they want to clarify this. They say, I want to release my appraisal contingency so I get my offer accepted. But don't worry, if the appraisal comes alone, my buyer doesn't have the cash to bridge the gap, the loan's going to get denied anyways, and I'm going to cancel on loan contingency. So this says no. If the cash to close, if you waived appraisal contingency, if cash to close is the reason that you can't, the loan is not approved, you can't cancel a loan contingency. What?
What happens in that case?
Yeah, like what if they just, yeah, like what
What
does?
happens?
They just don't have the money.
What happens?
We're forcing you to buy this house if you don't have the money to buy it.
You just lose your
equity. Yeah.
Yeah, I will show you. This is in the contract. Oh, I want to point this one thing out. This is a biggie. This has been this one. Failure of the buyer to obtain insurance may justify cancellation based on necessity, but not the loan contingency. So we're seeing on rural properties, it's very hard to get insurance, fire insurance, or it's very expensive. And because it's so expensive, I'm not qualifying for the payment, right? Because now it's $500 a month, and I can't afford that, and I'm getting the loan denied because the insurance I can get, or I can't find insurance, is stopping the loan from
So
happening.
it'll let your buyer out if they can't do that.
But it's not that, getting insurance for the home is not part of the loan contingency. This is saying it's part of the inspection contingency. So if you removed your inspection contingency and your buyer can't get financing because of the insurance costs, you can't cancel on loan contingency.
If you, within that 5-day rule kicks in though, right, if you don't have the information back from the insurance company?
That's only if the seller's delivering.
Only if the seller's disclosing
Yeah,
it.
the
It's not new information to the buyer, it's only seller disclosures.
So how do you encourage them
So
to
if they're buying
look
a
into
home,
insurance ahead of
if they're
time?
buying a home rurally,
Yes.
and you're gonna waive inspections, you should get they need to call their
Insurance
insurance
ahead.
guy and say, can you insure this house?
Okay.
And how much is it gonna cost? And are you okay with that, right? Okay?
Okay.
If that means if you're waiving, now, if you don't waive inspections contingency, just get it done during the inspection period, but it's not tied to the loan.
Or just keep it in mind.
Yeah, keep it in mind. Okay, I gotta go down, one more here. Appraisal, this is new. Okay, here you go. I'm on B1 now. Appraisals are often reliable source to verify square footage of the subject property. However, the ability to cancel based on measurements provided by appraisal falls within the investigation of property contingency. The appraisal contingency is solely limited to the value determined of the appraisal for any kind based on the appraisal. The buyer shall deliver a copy of the written appraisal to the seller.
Okay, wait.
All right, what's it saying?
That's like that problem.
So I've had this problem before on one of our properties. They say, tax records even say the house is 3,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Everything, boom, appraiser goes to the house. You know, the appraiser measures the house, 2,500. And appraiser even tells us, oh, I know, this builder in this community messed up. I've done this before. They're all recorded at 3, but they're actually all 2,500. They're like, what? We based our comps, everything off of 3,000, right? You waived inspection contingency, but you have appraisal contingency in place. You can't use appraisal contingency. The square footage amount that comes from the appraisal, if you use that to cancel, it must be from your inspection contingency, not your appraisal.
So how would you know? Do you have to go measure every listing to know the actual square footage?
No.
What's-
No.
But,
What do you mean, how would you know? As a buyer?
well, I'm just saying, like, if you're seeing the listing you had, it was.
Well, I'm just saying, be careful I know a lot of you are waiving your inspection contingencies, but just let you know what you're giving up, right? That's why they want to be clear about this in the contract, because they see the reason CAR did this, there's so many people, agents saying you need to waive your inspection contingency. Fine. If your insurance doesn't work out, you're screwed. Right? If your square footage is off, you're screwed.
I just still don't understand, how does that go back on a buyer? Like, why?
It just means don't waive your inspection contingencies, they're important.
Yeah.
Well, even if people don't waive them, or what if, right now in this competitive market, you're offering less days, 10 or 12 days.
Yeah, you're not gonna know.
You may not
The
know.
appraisal is gonna be longer
Yeah.
than that,
Right.
longer than 10 days.
Then you can say you can get a survey, measure. But that's why they want to, because they wanted to make it, because buyers were only finding this out, they weren't measuring themselves, they're finding out from the appraiser.
appraiser, yeah.
From the appraiser.
Yeah, because who does that? What, if you have a listing, who gets a third-party measurement?
I'm saying that, and they're saying,
It's up to the buyer.
they're saying, what they don't want to say is the square footage of the appraisal causes a new contingency.
And
So
sometimes-
say the house appraises, but the appraises that value, but the square footage is wrong, you cannot use the appraisal contingency.
Okay, but if the square footage is smaller than what it said, and the buyer still wants the house, but they can't get the loan for that amount.
Well,
Then
if
what?
it's
Then what?
low, if the appraisal is low, then you can still cancel, right?
Okay.
But if the appraisal is at value, but the square
But
footage is
find out
lower,
it's
they
smaller.
can't, and they are released inspection contingency.
Okay, so if they don't
They can't
care
cancel because square
about
footage is
that.
low, they can only cancel if the appraisal is low. That's what it's saying. Clear as
Okay,
mud?
that makes sense. That makes sense. Yes.
That's good for you sellers. That's good for you sellers,
She's happy.
right? You should be happy, yes.
And also sometimes the county has to measure the square footage.
Oh, trust me, I know. So if you're wholeheartedly relying on what's in the appraisal or what's in the tax records, beware, especially Sacramento, so
Or,
beware.
yeah.
So feel it.
It's happening.
Like, if you walk a house and it says it's 1,200 square feet, but it feels like 1,600, you should be talking to the seller, right? I mean, you know how houses are. You walk to a 2,000 square foot house and it feels like a 3,000 square foot house, you're like, this is weird, right?
Yeah.
So in this scenario, by volunteering a square footage disclosure, does that open up a ton of liability for the seller saying, oh, you disclosed it's this, because that's what they thought to the best of their
So
knowledge?
you've seen this square footage disclosure come out.
Yeah.
A lot of you seen it?
Like when they write it on.
I'm
the
not, as a broker, recommending that you use that because you're saying, I got the square footage and it came from the tax records. But now you're putting your name to it. No one needs to put a name to anything, right?
So.
You're buying, as you saw, a buyer is buying the house as is. MLS is not, it even says in MLS records are not to be deemed as, deemed as accurate. Buyer to verify.
So do you do that with your buyers? Do you verify the square footage each time?
The only time, I don't verify the square footage, but if I feel the house is not to what the square footage says, then I'm like, oh, something's weird, right? At that point, I'm asking questions.
So if you have a seller and say you don't provide that square footage advisory, but the buyer side provides and says, please sign this, don't. That's right? Is that what you're saying?
You don't have to, yes, as a broker, I can say, our broker does not advise us to sign this disclosure. You don't have to sign it. If it's not required by us, you're not required to sign it. Right?
What disclosure is that on?
The square footage
It's called-
advisory?
The square footage advisory. There's a new form out called the square footage advisory, which I've seen a lot of.
So I went to listing,
What's that?
I listing out the corner, and I looked at the tax records and everything says 1,600.
Uh-huh.
I walked up to the house and I looked at the house and this house is more like 2,500.
Yeah. So like,
And I asked the buyer and the buyer's like, oh yeah, the last refinance person recorded it incorrectly.
and that's the worst part about it. Think about this. Seller knows it's wrong. They want to hide it. They don't disclose it. If they did a refinance or they bought it and there was an appraisal done, they know. They were disclosed.
So
And they would
now, when I list, I have to go back to the title company before I do that and get it corrected, right? Or
No,
I mean,
it's not the title company that corrects, it's the, you don't want to correct it, it's the county assessor that does it. You don't correct it, what you do is saying, now when you list it, it says, when you list the home in MLS, Metro List, it says, here's the square footage, right? And you know if you change the square footage amount from anything that the tax record says, it doesn't let you check tax records, right? It's either gonna say then agent or seller. So if the square footage is wrong in MLS, you need to be like seller, what is the square footage? I don't know, let me check my last refi. Appraisal says this, okay, so seller, you're saying it's 2,500 square feet? Yes. Seller provided 2,500 square feet.
Get it from yourself.
Yeah, don't get it from you. I don't want agent on there providing the square footage now, you're liable, right? So. Sound fun?
Yay, all the last part.
Can the buyer, I mean, seller, understand?
All right. Just to reiterate it, if no appraisal continues to check in paragraph B, then the buyer not use a loan contingency specified throughout the cancel agreement. The sole reason behind to not obtain a loan is the appraisal relied on by the buyer's lender to buy the property. So this is saying if you're using the value of the appraisal as the reason to cancel a loan contingency, you can't.
Sounds like a lot of people got fired or more during the pandemic.
Just so you know, this is new. Buyer has 5 days after receipt to review a revised preliminary report furnishing California. So I want you to know, and it's in the contract for all that. This has been in the contract before, but I want you to know it's still there. Okay? It's called a right of rescission. Okay? There are certain documents that by state law, the buyer has a right to rescind the contract and get the deposit back regardless of contingency. You know, like, remember the VA, FHA VA loan contingency, federal law, mandatory can't waive?
Loophole.
There are state laws that require certain disclosures of documents. TDS, SPQ, listing agent avid, okay. Prelim, NHD, and fire hardening. If those documents are disclosed after start of escrow, the buyer will have 5 days, no matter what, even if they waived all contingencies. Period. Done. So I give you a contingency release that clause, waive all contingencies. You, day 7, you give me all the disclosures. I have 5 days to cancel the agreement. No questions asked. I get it. You can't, I can't waive it. Done. Okay? So this is saying if the company does a revised preliminary report, they issue their preliminary report and they give you a revision,
5 days.
they get another 5 days, no matter what.
New information.
Correct. Okay, how do you avoid this if you're a listing agent? If you disclose those documents prior to getting in contract, they have no right of rescission.
If you make them sign it, right?
Correct. So if you're gonna this is why, I don't know why agents are lazy. If you're gonna list the house, get the seller disclosure signed up front.
Yeah, right.
It's so stupid why you'd wanna redo it, go back or redo these.
And then what,
Seems so
provide
stupid.
them in,
Like, do you wanna drive less to the property or more to the property? I don't know, you tell me.
do you provide it in attached docs, or?
You can provide it in attached docs, or if you get an offer, you can counter it in and says, buyer acknowledges and signs all these seller disclosures.
that.
And you just include them along with the counter offer. They have to sign it, they give it back to you. Now, no right of rescission unless you do a revision. If you do an addendum to the TDS, or you do revised prelim, at that point, they get another 5 days. Clear as mud? They cleaned this up too. This is about lease items because we got a lot of lease items. Buyer's review and ability and willingness to assume any lease, maintenance agreement, or ongoing financial or to accept the property subject to any lien, disclosure program is specified as a contingency of this agreement. Any assumption of the lease shall not require financial engagement or contribution by the seller. Seller, after perfectly notice the buyer to form, may cancel the agreement if they refuse to enter necessary written agreements to accept responsibility for the seller disclosed. This is happening because of sellers. So we're disclosing on time. Here's a solar, you have to release it, and the buyers were dragging their feet.
Solar leases hold everything up, so no annoying.
So this is saying, hey, you have to do it, and if you don't do it within specified time, which is back on the other first 2 pages, notice to perform, and then I can cancel for 2 days if you don't do it. Okay? You're like, oh my gosh, John, what did we get into?
It sounds
They
so
changed the whole,
scary.
they changed
It
my
is.
whole thing.
It's fine.
They changed my whole thing. Oh, here you go. This is about removal contingencies. For contingencies of review of seller documents, preliminary time for HOA disclosures. Oh, sorry. Oh. Buyer shall have within time specified 5 days after receipt of seller documents to remove occurs later after contingency writing and cancel this agreement. So this is the provision
So
that
that's the 5
documents
days.
the fundamental right. When it says seller documents, they're talking about back in the previous paragraph. They talk seller documents, which includes TDS, SBQ, listing agent avid. So I know your late listing agent avids are giving people 5 days. Every time you do it, 5 days. So stop doing it. Do your avids up front. Once you do it.
Yeah. if you have a listing, you do
You're
it.
standing there, the guy's taking photos and stuff. Just do your avid. Okay. I want to put this existing items. They did add language right here. This is B, 9B. There was a lot of dispute over what was attached when it came to window coverings.
Yeah.
Like, yes.
Before you talk about that, going back to the
Yes.
prelims and
Yes.
HOA docs,
Yes.
we don't have control of that.
You don't have to what?
We don't have control over when we're gonna get the HOA docs, especially some, like the Thomas Park, they take forever. So-
Sucks to be you.
Right, so do we do this prior to listing?
Oh, I recommend that. So when I get a seller, they sign a listing agreement, I go, look, California law already requires you to pay for the HOA docs. There's no negotiation. You have, now the transfer fee is negotiable, but to produce the docs, seller has to pay. So seller, I'm gonna pre-open escrow, but they're gonna send you a form to order the docs now so we have them. Because if we get them late to the buyer will have an extra 5 days to cancel this agreement and get their deposit back, and we don't want that. Oh, thank you. I'll make sure I pay for those. Get them up front, all right?
Window covering.
All right, window coverings. Windows, doors, and screens, awnings, shutters, window coverings, which includes blinds, curtains, drapery, shutters, or other materials that cover any portion of the window. That is new. Before they would say, before the standard was, if you had a rod mounted to the wall with curtains hanging on it, the rod was attached, but the curtains were not.
Now the curtains are.
Now everything is. If it covers any portion of the window, it's included.
In other words, take the curtains down if you want to take them.
Yeah, if you want to take the curtains down, take the curtains down.
Take them down.
Or counter it out.
Okay, yeah.
Or the lamps, some lamps, too.
They put in some other stuff, pool spa equipment they clarified, so, pool spa equipment including but not limited to any cleaning equipment such as motor ride, on-ride pool cleaners, pool nets, pool covers,
Pool
everything on the
nets.
pool, pool.
Pool net.
And they also included now light bulbs,
Oh, garage door opener.
including smart light bulbs. So if your person has Google and they want to turn on their lights and turn off, they use smart light bulbs, they can't take them out if that was in there before.
Read all this.
All right, here we go, 5 here, B5. All smart home and security control devices are included in the sale except for non-dedicated personal computer, tablet, or phone use to control such devices. So if they're controlling it from their cell phone,
You don't have to give them
you
your
have
cell
to give them
phone.
the cell phone, but anything else that is specific to the requirement that's not a personal use, like a tablet computer, must stay with the house.
Is that going back to like the Nest thermostats and whatnot?
Yeah, Nest thermostats, whatever you need to run that security system, if it's not a personal use item, like a phone or a tablet or a personal PC, it stays with the home. Unless you can or not. Okay, I'm on, what page am I on? Page 7, we're getting there. This is where it says, unless otherwise specified in paragraph, brackets attached to wall, floor, ceiling for any component furniture item will be removed, and the holes or other damage shall be repaired, but not painted.
That was that's what it had said before, right?
Yeah. No, it didn't. Well, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is where it says, if seller is to pay for these items that does not fill the seller obligation in the time specified, the buyer incurs costs to comply with lender requirements concerning these items. We're talking about the water heater straps. The seller shall be responsible for paying buyer's costs. So if you incur a reinspection fee because the seller didn't put in CO detectors, the seller is gonna have to pay now. If you really want to talk about statutory rights and right of rescission, is paragraph 11. This was in before the old contract, but this tells you what documents get the automatic right of rescission. Okay. So I just want to clear this up. This was always been part of it. When can the seller actually get the deposit?
Only if it, affects, what is it, oh, I'm not thinking of it. It has to financially, it'd be a financial strain on them. They have to prove it's a financial hardship to keep the EMD.
Kind of, yeah. So, two things. If the buyer doesn't release contingencies on time and you do a notice for form, if they don't do any of the other things like put the deposit in, return the seller disclosures, whatever, you can notice for form 2 days, then you can unilaterally cancel the agreement. Seller can cancel, but you gotta get the deposit back. The only time the seller has chance at the deposit is if they don't close. All contingencies are released, they don't close, and you issue a demand to close escrow, you wait 3 days, and then you can cancel unilaterally. At that point, the deposit is up for grabs. It's negotiable at that point.
And
It doesn't default to the seller,
And
then, and then the only way to resolve it is by mutual agreement, arbitration award, or court order. That's it.
so sellers like really never get these.
No, you can. I've gotten responses. You just have to be aggressive about it, right? Like if they don't close, you issue a CD. Just note you can send a notice for form and a demand to close escrow days prior to close. So if it's closing in 3 days, you can send it on 3 days prior to close so that it expires on that day. So literally you can cancel the next day. Same thing with notice of form. Whew. Any questions?
I always thought it was after. I always thought you had to do that after.
So for the notice for form, it's 3 days now, not a default of 2,
What is?
the notice for form?
No, notice for form is 2 days. Demand to close escrow is 3 days. Okay. Fire hardening advisory disclosure, all of you guys should be using that now. I've seen a lot of people not even looking at the form. Read the form, there's a box where it says it's not in a fire zone. We're pushing back a lot of forms where it says it's not checked, not a fire zone, but it says, it's saying it's in, the default of the form says it's in a fire zone. If you don't check the box, then it defaults out, so please do that.
Is that
Oh.
required across the board now?
It is required across the board. A defensible space disclosure in there. Just so you know, the fire hardening form changed. I'm not gonna go over it now, but it's changed now. Now both seller and buyer sign on it. But also, remember there's different statuses for fire hardening. There could be a local requirement. So the county or city may require it. If they do, then they have to get a city or county approval. CAL FIRE, if you're not in a local jurisdiction required, CAL FIRE, which is a state organization, will require it. At that point, you got to get approval from them. Some jurisdictions allow you to pass that requirement on to the buyer. So there's a fourth option that says, here's a jurisdiction, I didn't get approval, but buyer, you have 6 months to do it, take it over. But some jurisdictions won't allow it, some local jurisdictions require it at the point of sale. I know CAL FIRE requires it at the point of sale. So be careful on that. Withholding taxes. This is new. So we know withholding taxes.
So John, you fill out the fire hardening after you got the NHD?
Say that again?
You fill out the fire hardening after you got the NHD?
Correct. Fire hardening is required if the home, yes. Well, it's not required, I think, was it 2010? If the home is built after 2010, it doesn't, sorry. No, sorry. Fire hardening, defensible space is required.
But when?
All the time. If it's not in the, if the energy says it's not in a very high fire zone,
That's what I
you
want
just
to do.
check, there's a box on it, you say check not in a fire zone.
But you can't do it prior to getting the NHD.
Correct, so you'll have to wait for that on the NHD. Which I recommend, that's why I recommend pre-opening escrow and maybe ordering NHD up front, because the fire hardening disclosure is actually one of the documents that's all automatically gets 5 days of rescission. So if you do it later, they get 5 days rescission. Okay, phone 4. Buyers of this property that is paying. I'm gonna go to 13E. 13E. If the buyer's a legal entity, that means the LLC or something else, and the property purchase price is at least $300,000, and the purchase price is made without a bank loan, that means it's cash. A geo-targeting order issued by the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network requires title compliance with the certain information about the buyer depending on where the property is located.
Money laundering.
Buyer agrees to cooperate with the title or have to comply with GTO.
Money laundering.
Now is a new requirement, federal requirement, yes. If an entity is purchasing a house that is $300,000 more with cash, they will have to get approval from the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which means if you're tagged as a money launderer, or you're gonna get tagged by title. And guess what? The feds have probably showed up at the doorstep, so. Just note that, if you're doing over 300 cash thousand offers, you're gonna have to flag that, your buyer's going to flag that. All right. Seller's right to cancel, that is the same thing, so and this is where buyer's right to cancel. This is where it says here. The buyer by the seller gives written notice of cancellation to duly rights to escrow. Express in terms of agreement. This is effective cancellation. The parties agree to sign and deliver mutual instructions to cancel the sale. If any party entitled to funds, less fees and holder on behalf of the fees and costs. Always say. A release of funds will require mutual signed release instructions from the parties, judicial decision or arbitration award. Period. And if someone is supposed to give it back, so if your sellers are saying like, I have a seller contingency, they don't provide contingency release. I give them a 2-day notice, I cancel, and you don't, and the seller's like, I don't want to give them the deposit back, even though the contract says they could. Says if they go to court, the buyer can win attorney fees plus an extra $1,000 just because they hassled the buyer for it. So. All right.
Question for you, John.
Yes.
On the notice to perform, when that's delivered, the expiration, is that at 11:59? Or is it like 48 hours from the time it was delivered?
It's not 48 hours, it's 11:59. So when you deliver it, and we're gonna talk about delivery here for a second. When you deliver it, that's day 0. Day 1, day 2. And that second day, that day must fit on a non-weekend or holiday.
For the notice to perform.
Notice to perform.
What about the other like
The
timelines
demand.
Same thing, demand and close escrow, same.
and contingencies?
Contingency, yes,
I
okay.
thought that was changing.
I'm gonna go all the way, sorry, move forward, these are all things, so.
Currently, they do not, they cannot.
They
follow
cannot
the
include, so
weekend.
I'm going all the way to page 13, and days.
Oh, I guess it is the, yeah.
Days
Or the
being
next
calendar
day.
days, however, delivery deposit estimate is based on business days. So it used to be, you're correct, it used to be a contingency release could not end on a weekend or holiday, any deadline.
Okay.
But now they changed it. They said, now it's this day. So if it's 17 days and that falls on a Sunday, it's Sunday, except for the deposit,
Like the EMD.
the EMD.
Because
you have to.
business days, you have to be able to wire
Yeah,
it.
yeah. All right, this is important.
What
There's a
about
big,
close-
what?
Close of escrow, right?
Yeah, close of escrow has to be business day. And the whole holiday.
Oh, county days.
They're just saying the first day is the next day. But they remove close of escrow too.
No, it's a minute.
What?
5.
Yeah, close of escrow has to be on a work week.
Oh, yeah.
It's page 13.
Yeah, here it is. Oh, yeah, yeah. Number 5 says it must be, close of escrow must be the day when the recorder's office is open. So it used to say it in days, but now it doesn't. So if the recorder's office opens, you can count that as a day to close. If it's not, you have to default to the next day. There's a big issue about delivery, especially with notice of performance. We're talking about if you send something to someone, is it considered delivered? So if you're getting a notice to perform, you're trying to work this out. I give a notice to perform, but they know they need more time. We're trying to work on this loan contingency. We're trying to get this loan approved. You're the buy side. You're like, I'm just going to ignore it for the weekend. I don't acknowledge receipt. And on Monday, I'm like, oh, I thank you, I got this notice to perform. And people are arguing, did the 2 days start? Is it when it was received? How was delivered? So we have a lot of confusion on delivery. Okay, they say like, actually, we had a similar situation. So they've done a few things that cleared it up, so I want to point this for, oh, sorry. These are all, the only thing they changed here on liquidated damages and arbitration, they put those in boxes, just so you know. But I want to know tell you what they did differently, which is the signing part, which is beautiful. Okay. I'm going to go with delivery first. This is the sign where the real estate, so the buyers and sellers are now all on one signature page. The agents are all on one signature page along with escrow. This is the last page, page 16. If you notice here on page 16 for the agents, it says designated electronic delivery address, email address, alternative address. You need to put an email or alternative address in there. When you send a notice now, if you send it to that email,
That's his official.
it's delivered.
Street address.
It's delivered.
And texting. You can have the text number.
Yeah, you can put them all. So if you text them and say, attached is the notice to perform, and you send it to that number, even if they don't respond, it's considered delivery.
So this could be effective like when an agent has a couple different email addresses that they're using to correspond, if it's not.
This even applies to when's contract day 0?
Right, so for example, like you email the contract to that email and then the listing agent responds with a different email address and you continue that thread. If it's not delivered to that one in the contract, it's not considered delivered.
Correct. So if you send it to an email, say they put an email here, but you're contacting about a different email. If you sent the notice of perform to that email, it's not considered delivered until they acknowledge it. But if you send it to that email, it's considered delivered. So agents, if you're a listing side and you put an email in there, make sure you're checking that email because your sellers are obligating to that timeline.
Does it
Buyer side
only
too.
have it for buyer side,
No,
or does
no.
it make the seller do it too? Okay.
Yeah. And it does here, car form AAA, which is good. If you put more than one buyer or seller's agent on there, check that box, it automatically puts the AA in there. AAA. So some of you are doing it in teams. It all puts in there. So I like this a lot. So make sure you're doing this. So if you're going to put an alternate, that also applies. So if someone sends it to the alternate and not the main, doesn't matter. Delivered. So if you don't check your email that often, and you have a TC that checks their emails, then you want to put the TC email in there. But when the TC gets it, they gotta let you know because it's considered delivered once it hits that email. Once they hit the send, it's delivered. All right. One thing I do want to know, and then we'll be done here. The buyers, this is the signature page, expiration offer still there. One thing they did include is they moved the RCSDs into the contract. Remember, if you're buying for an entity, you had to have an RCSD, and all this stuff. I'm the trustee of this trust, and I'm allowed to sign. Now they put it into the contract. You don't need an RCSD.
If you check the box.
If you check the box. If you don't check the box, then you got to have RCSD. So check the box. If you're on the buy side, entity buyer, okay? Who's legally authorized? You put the buyer's name, whoever's signing right there. I'm the trustee.
Oh, that's cool.
You put the full name of the trust. That's the biggest problem. A lot of times we're saying like it's Jones Family Trust, when it's really the Barbara Jones and John Jones Family Revocable Trust dated 1928, right? Here you have to put the full legal entity name, whatever it is.
Hey, John,
So on what? Yeah.
I was gonna say, sorry, to backtrack a little bit, sorry.
No problem.
Mario's asking, day of delivery would be day 0, correct?
Day of delivery is day 0 on the contract. Day of delivery. So if I send a notice perform and I send it to a designated email address, that's day 0. So send it before 11:59. Right? Okay.
But that's only for if your buyer is in need of that.
So if you're going to say your buyer is buying an LLC, right?
Yeah.
Okay. On the contract, it may say John Barnado LLC, right? I put that in the byline, in the up front on the first page. When I get here, it may not be John Bernardo LLC, it may be John and Jonathan Lee Bernardo, or Vienna C. Bernardo LLC dated 2018. That may be the official name of it. That's what you put here. So you can get away with Bernardo LLC up front, but here you gotta put the real name.
You also, sorry.
Or assign,
What?
or assign name,
Or a signing name?
yeah,
What do you mean?
on behalf of the, it's LLC, the signing authority.
Yeah, so, well,
So that's
if you have
the
if you have the official,
signer.
if you have the official LLC name and you can fit it in the byline, then you just put the same thing here, the same name. Just shows it there. And then you sign it, you see signature, printed name of buyer, printed legal authorized signer. So if the signer say, John Bernardo, printed name John Bernardo, and I'm doing an LLC, I print name and say John Bernardo again, right? I'm saying I'm the one signing and I'm legally authorized to sign.
Would that be the same for probate?
Probate too. So I'm an administrator of a probate for an estate. The seller is estate of John Bernardo. My daughter's selling it. My daughter signs. She's gonna be, Isabella Bernardo, administrator, right? Makes sense? And it's gonna be estate of John Bernardo.
All right.
Okay? Cool? Same thing for the seller side if you do that same thing, so. They are also putting the seller check counteroffer there. They also add a backup offer then. Just know if you're gonna put someone a backup offer, you can legally put them in backup offer. So please do that, but seller counteroffer. The same thing with entities. Same thing on the seller side. Seller's an entity, they need to put their full information in there. And the seller signs. They took out also that the agent has to present the offer, now only for, negotiations. Now, remember, we require rejected offers. So now only the seller needs to initial, and there can no counteroffers being made. They only need to initial on a rejected offer if the counteroffer is not made, the initial there. If a counteroffer is made, we just need to see the other offer, and so that they didn't respond. Questions? That is all the changes, which is a lot. It is recorded, we'll put it on our YouTube channel, and we'll do another one a week from now, so. Yes, we will send out a sample copy to every agent in the office here shortly. So, okay. Remember, this goes live on the 14th, next Monday. Thank you, sorry about that long training. I appreciate you, that was ugly and tiresome.
Very informative.
Did it tingle your compliance lawyers? Yeah, oh yeah. The black was good because it has every form that's tied to the contract in there, yeah, it has every form. Yeah. That's crazy, I actually haven't, but it's only.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Yes.
Okay, so that question I was asking you, so I have this new listing in the Arden area. It's an older
With the
home.
pesticide.
Yeah, and so, they originally were gonna work with a different agent. Has that, and we can find ways.
Oh, wow, okay. Nice.
And so anyways, so she had sent me, I get, it's like older homes, first homeowners.
Yeah.
So it came back with, infestations of, winter strength beetles, in addition to some actively, like, there's some big stuff, and so it came out to about $15,000, and I think, North American Home Inspections seems to have been a higher priced, non people, so I'm trying to guide them, and I think if it was just dry rot or different things, maybe we would fire back clearing it, but since it's like an active, pretty good infestation, I think it's good to just clear it.
I agree.
And then we have a claim, maybe, here, we cleared section 1, and then we can price it appropriately.
Correct.
It's a really nice neighborhood, and it's gonna be an.
It probably behooves them to, for pricing purposes. If their goal is to maximize value.
Yeah, and
Because
it is.
even if it's a $15,000 bill, a buyer's gonna be like, I want $30,000 off. Because they're gonna want, I have to hassle with it, right?
Right, and the home is paid off, it's the owner estate passed away, so it's very simple, we're selling it, we're just buying that, so I was telling you, it'd probably be better in this situation. Because who wants to also move into a house that's infested?
No one's gonna want it, yeah.
And
I mean,
especially-
you're gonna hurt the buyer, because it's only gonna be a straight cash investment.
Right, exactly, and then you cut out VA, or, different people, so And then you can get one of these companies to take it out of escrow, so it's not like $15,000 out of pocket, so,
Be careful, a lot of them put a limit on that, so.
yeah, a cost like.
Like, no more than $8,000.
Okay.
So just check.
So I said, okay, here's what I might do is call the American Home Professional and say, hey, is there any way that we can negotiate this price? Because, we're gonna have it done, would you rather have it work or do you want us to go find somebody else? I know the pest company that will maybe do it for a bit.
Yeah, I think that's for
Little bit
everything.
less.
And it's hard because I don't know, they're calling out like $3,600 for some of these, beetle things in two separate areas. They're talking about tenting the house, I don't honestly have
You'd have to
experience
tent the house, yeah.
on what that.
With
would
beetles,
cost.
you need to tent the house.
You have to tent the house, okay. So obviously they're big deals, and I think if we take care of it, get it staged, it's looking gorgeous.
Oh,
it's in
for
the-
like,
if
we
yeah,
ask the
street, it's gonna sell, there's nothing immovable.
Yeah, on these situations, if you're doing that, I tend to go with the company that did the pest inspection. If you start, you get another pest inspection.
Right,
Now I have to just look at that. What if they're different? What if it's calling out different things?
right.
Different things like that.
So.
I'd rather, I have that happen, and I'd rather not deal with that. I'd rather it look like one company. Now, I wouldn't push it, can do it cheaper, but like, yeah, you need to get clear through that. Now we have pest inspection, kind of clear.
Okay. What's the best way to say it, to negotiate, what's the best way to approach it?
Just say, hey, my sellers, thank you for doing inspection. My sellers want to do repairs privately so they can get a better value for the home. Problem is, they don't have, they need to net a certain amount to get to where they want to go, and they can't, so then we can maybe negotiate the price. Now, here's the thing, North American, let me say the backside, so North American,
Right,
they do their business, but the contractors who do the work are different from people who do inspection.
Oh, okay.
They have to catch it from the inspector.
So,
So if the.
it's
homeowner
usually
has-
that inspector is leading that contractor through. They're bidding it, the inspector is bidding it. And they're gonna cut to North American, but they're making a profit.
Right, right.
They're like a third party, almost.
Right.
Oh, no.
And had it been just dry out or something, like maybe you would go with a contractor.
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
something
I had
like
one pork chop,
If you're protecting it like that,
chicken
then
in
you
the-
do the whole thing.
from the freezer in the refrigerator.
And we may not get, a much lower price.
Well, yeah, we can.
You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, and you're not gonna, when it comes to tenting, you're not gonna get much difference.
Okay.
They're, right now, none of the pest companies actually tent. They're all third party.
Okay.
There's only one, as of last I checked, there's only one company in all of Greater Sacramento that tents.
Who's that? Okay, but it's not like Twin or anything like that.
No, it's not actually a pest company.
Oh.
All the pest companies contract with them to tent.
Same here.
Literally, they get flat fee.
Cause I had this movie this morning like I'm supposed
Have you
to.
ever had a tenant house? Seems like crazy with the tenant.
So I think I'll go ahead
Well, and
and
it's
go
vacant,
home and
so.
Oh,
don't stop.
Oh,
to
that's
get
big,
pork
then it's
chop.
not that hard.
Yeah.
But it's, usually 5-7 days.
Oh, that was in here.
Put a sign.
Okay, so best
That's not
scenario is to renegotiate with them and see what we can do for.
Say, hey, can we work on price? Or, I would even call, I send a seller call
Piece of scrap paper.
and say, hey, we want to do this, but that's really expensive for us.
Oh.
Right, right.
But it kind of goes out of, it kind of goes out of the wall, if you want to say, but can you put it in escrow?
Right, right, no. I
If you're gonna put it in escrow, then they pretty much got it.
Okay, cool, thanks for your
When
time.
is this coming up?
14th, December 14th. That's Monday.
You answered my question already, but I just want to confirm. The
Oh, I
buyers
got
have
it.
all contingencies, signed
I'll send you some stuff over here.
and released it. For whatever reason, they cancel later on, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later. I cannot force for them to
Release it.
release
The deed.
unless it's a mutual agreement.
Isn't
I
that the
can be
case?
aggressive and say.
That was the
"Hey,
case before, That's been always the case.
Yeah, but I've always succeeded with them.
They want to get into the deposit.
Yeah. never happened.
Yeah, well,
Now it's technically,
anything but close of escrow, basically you succeeded. The buyer could sue your seller, go to monthly court, say they frauded me. That should have got it back.
so it's useless basically.
unless you don't close.
contingency.
Unless they release all contingencies and don't close. At that point, you can negotiate your RDAP.
We're not talking closing, we're talking about them canceling.
The contract is pretty specific. It says, basically it says, any contingencies not released or any of the requirements, E&D, any return of seller close, anything in the contract that requires the buyer to do. Basically, seller can cancel, but they gotta give the deposit.
Even if they decide to continue to remove.
No, well, no. If they sign the full contingency removal,
That's what I'm saying.
but then
Because I'm very strict with that.
okay,
The day before, I always remind the buyer's agent, remove, remove, remove.
okay, so say they've removed all contingencies. We're supposed to close in 10 days. They want to cancel that.
Yeah.
Legally,
After signing,
what do you mean?
after signing the contingency removal.
Yeah, they remove contingencies already, 10 days to close, buyers want to cancel. Whatever, I don't know, whatever. Legally, you couldn't ask for the deposit. You have to wait till 7 more days, issue a demand to close escrow, wait till 10 days to close escrow, and then the next day say, I want the deposit.
Okay, so if they wanna cancel, we issue demand to close, wait for
3 days prior, 3 days prior, so you can do it right then.
So no,
So the only time the contract says you can, the only time the contract legally says that you can get the deposit, this is the contract, is if the buyers release all contingencies and they haven't closed and you issued a demand to close escrow in 3 days and a half.
There's so confusing. They cancel 10 days before. They remove all contingencies. They cancel 10 days before. SP has to wait 7 days
And then issue a demand to close.
before she
And then
can issue
another
a
3
notice
days.
of perform.
Yes.
and at that point.
You say, we don't agree. We don't want to release, we're not releasing the deposit. We don't agree.
Mhm.
Then they hash back and forth.
Mhm.
And day
And then,
day 7, you issue a demand to close escrow.
right, 10 days later.
Then 10 days later, it expires, then you say, okay,
Or keeping it deposit.
we want to keep the deposit. And now it's mutual agreement, arbitration award, judicial.
So what if the cancellation says they give the seller the deposit? Is that still legal, or can they?
It is
come back
legal
after?
for the buyer to release the deposit. But legally, they can come back and
They
say,
can fight.
they can later come back and say, they tricked me.
So say during that 7-day waiting period, we cannot like put the listing back live because we're technically still in contract?
Correct. But Metro List won't know it unless the other side complains.
But they've already
No,
sent the
we can put
cancellation.
it back as active if they cancel, but we just can't ask for them to release the deposit until it expires, the contract expires.
Well,
right?
no, because
We have stuff.
you asked them to cancel, so now you're saying you don't
No,
have
I
to
didn't
close.
ask them to cancel, they canceled.
They can't unilaterally cancel. If they release all the contingencies, they have no right to unilaterally cancel.
But if they do.
But if they do,
They say, I want to cancel.
Yeah.
You can say, we don't agree.
you say we don't agree?
We don't agree.
Make them close, and if they
You must close
don't-
escrow. You must close escrow. You release all contingencies. You have no right to cancel. We risk losing the deposit. We're like, no, we're canceling. We're gonna do this, blah, 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 blah. Fine, then we'll wait to close escrow.
That's messy.
So if we issue.
I mean, that's if you,
John, I don't like it. There's nothing I can do.
that's been the way it
Nothing I
is,
can do.
but that's the way it's always
I don't
been.
like it.
But if you can get them to negotiate it, that's fine. But just so you know, you may run afoul of the contract, right? So, by doing it.
This is very buyer friendly.
It's been that way.
It's crap.
It's been that way a long time. It's not just now, it's been that way. You just
But
find out now.
now it's in
Now
your
it's more
face.
obvious.
Now it's more obvious, yeah, now it's in your
No.
face, yeah, now it's in your face, yeah.
Okay.
John, when I was in real estate back in the 90s, the RPA was only around 8 to 10 pages. Now it's 16 pages. I couldn't believe that.
If you talk to,
It's crazy. Who's the other broker?
Ken?
Ken Dick, he has a copy of the California Association of Realtors, RPA, 1 page.
No,
Wow.
dude, seriously. Back in the 90s, it was like, it was only like 8 to 10 pages. and now, like,
It was 11, now it's 16.
What the hell, dude?
16.
I'm gonna have a very different conversation with my listing appointment. When they sign the listing agreement, the next form I'm gonna show them says, by the way, here's the RPA, here's the new rules.
What I've told my team to do is all seller disclosures up front. When we counter offer, that if we're gonna put them in the metro list, if we counter offer, if they counter offer, they haven't signed it, produce them, then we're going to make them produce it, make counter it, say you sign off on it.
Yeah.
Because there's no right of rescission.
Oh, that's gonna
Because that way it
be-
eliminates right of rescission.
Mhm.
Then the only thing I have to worry about if they're FHA, VA, and appraisal. That's all. That's all.
Good job.
All right, thank you.
Kind of threw me off with that question.
I know.
The thing was, man, every lender's a
you're a
little
lender.
different, so
Yeah.
I write pre-qualified with DU approval. That's how I do mine. So I always get
And most people,
desktop underwriter approval in order to give that, because I don't even, I mean, pre-recs and pre-approvals really don't matter, because nobody cares about those. So I always do desktop underwriter, always.
yeah, for pre-approval, most people are getting DU approval, right?
Yeah, DU, yeah.
DU approval, but, do you get docs?
Yeah, I have to get docs in order to give you an approval, because I have to run it through desktop. underwriter.
Yeah, so I usually say when they get DU approval, that's a pre-approval.
Okay.
Everything
okay.
short of that is a pre-qualification.
Pre-call.
Because you're not verifying things.
Every
You haven't
lender
gone
is
to
a
the
little
lender,
different, like I
right?
said.
Yeah.
So you threw me off, man. I was like, oh no.
You're like, what?
It's all good though, man, all good.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
No problem.